Hi, my name is Tayson Thaver, and I'm going to be talking about the health and environmental impacts on the waste management of Pakistan.
Hi, my name is Nayab Khan, and I'm going to be talking about the overall implications of the waste management system in Pakistan. Throughout the overall MSL program, we had the opportunity to explore a variety of topics. Drawing from our diverse backgrounds in healthcare, we are all interested in pursuing careers where we can help give back to people for the betterment of society. A very impactful class that we were able to take was Health and Human Rights, where we were able to discuss the environmental and health deficiencies around the world. We used the class to explore the waste management system in Pakistan. Pakistan is a beautiful country with its diverse culture, delicious food, extravagant clothes, and beautiful landscape. Its beauty, however, is blemished by its poor waste management practices within the country. Around 49.6 million tons of solid waste are produced annually. To put this into perspective, the Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world made of steel and concrete, and the amount of solid waste that is produced is close to around 100 Burj Khalifas. Around 87,000 tons are produced per week, and the majority of solid waste is present in cities due to urbanization and industrialization. Solid waste is generated in urban areas of Pakistan and is estimated to be produced at 55,000 tons per day. More than 50% of the population is living in urban areas, and only a small proportion of the garbage is collected, and only some waste actually ends up in the designated waste management sites that has been designated by municipalities. The rest ends up going towards unauthorized open dumps, water bodies, and open spaces around the streets, or they are left uncollected in contaminated areas and pose health and environmental risks. The amount of trash production is anticipated to only increase by around 2.4% annually due to population growth, industrialization, and rapid urbanization.
One of the major reasons for Pakistan's poor solid waste management system is due to the absence of a primary regulatory framework. The Pakistan environmental legislation is made up of 3 levels, including the federal, the provincial, and the local. Each tier of legislation is responsible for an area relating to environmental protection. The federal government tends to be more concerned with waste management for the country, a primary focus on solid waste generated by industrial plants and factories. Next, the provincial government oversees the local government and implements strategies to establish developmental plans in dealing with solid waste. Finally, narrowing down to the local government, it focuses on the specific regulations within the city with more concern over the collection and disposal of waste daily. Throughout the years, Pakistan has attempted to implement laws and regulations concerning the problem with 3 major federal acts. The first is the Pakistan Environmental Protection Act, which includes the protection of environmental conditions affected by water contamination, air pollution, and waste management, including organic and inorganic materials. The second one is the National Environmental Quality Standard, which is a set of uniform standards for laboratory protocol to increase accuracy and validity of waste management samples in testing. The third being the Hazardous Substance Rule, which establishes a plan of action that involved the control of waste management as well as limiting the activities of industries involved in producing and contributing to the overall waste.
As you can see from this slide, this is the current process to reduce waste. So overall, integrating the informal sector in waste management aims to improve recycling rates, reduce environmental pollution, alleviate poverty, and create more inclusive and sustainable waste management systems.
Most waste is disposed through these practices. Open burning sites release pollutants into the air through fumes and smoke. Open dumping sites refer to throwing away waste in undesignated areas, such as open fields and vacant lots. Burying trash in empty areas that are not designated landfills pose risks as trash is no longer visible. Each of these methods present extreme risks to health and the environmental. Being closer to dumping sites and using contaminated water sources can affect people's health, causing them to contract illnesses due to being exposed to toxins, viruses, and bacteria. Burning illegal dumping sites as a way to remove waste causes excessive air and groundwater pollution. Open dumping sites are common within Pakistan and are hotbeds for disease such as malaria and typhoid, as well as other infections and exposure to toxic gases. The Pakistan National Conservation Strategy has stated that water-related diseases make up to 40% of all communicable diseases. These water-related deaths are often affecting infants and make up to 60% of their death rate. Waste can cause environmental implications in both land and water sources. For land sources, the anaerobic decay of waste in landfills causes greenhouse gas release such as methane. This occurs from organic waste degradation. Solid waste combustion facilities release nitrous oxide, polluting the air and can cause respiratory issues for people such as those with asthma, the children, and the elderly. Burning waste has been a method to remove waste, but it also releases toxins into the air and land and can seep into groundwater, contaminating it. For water sources, plastic waste is often dumped into these water sources and travels through barrages while sitting exposed in the sun and to mechanical factors. This causes macroplastics to then degrade into nanoplastics. Nanoplastics then leach into freshwater reservoirs and groundwater, contaminating it and becoming unsafe to consume. It is also extremely costly to clean these contaminated water sources.
Here we wanted to focus on the industrial area and consider one of the more developed cities of Pakistan when narrowing down our overall issue of waste management. Lahore has one of the best focuses on the improvement for regulatory control over waste management. Lahore is the second largest city in Pakistan, and currently it is the only city in the Punjab province to have a proper solid waste management system. Based on statistical analysis, the current population in the city makes up about 10 million, with 7,690 tons of solid waste generated per day. This leads to about 500,000 tons of municipal solid waste annually. Here are some examples of the common practices, with most waste being thrown on the streets near large storage containers. Study on the generation, collection, transportation, and disposal of waste management in Lahore shows that presently 60% of the waste management is collected and disposed in open dumps, while 40% is not collected and lies along the roadsides, streets, drains, and open sewers.
Big polythene bags are located outside of households and provided by the private solid waste collection companies for a charge. Only 1.3% of households were reported to have these when a study was conducted in the Lahore area. However, these number of houses are negligible compared to the total houses that are present in the study area. Fieldwork was also conducted within the same study and indicated that around 3,000 dumps are found per day within the studied area. They're found in roads, walkways, vacant plots, storm drains, water drains, and open sewers. Waste is often found around these containers rather than within them for two different reasons. First of all, it is more common to throw waste on the roads rather than within the containers. And second of all, the waste is disposed mainly by children and maids working in the houses, so these containers are not accessible to the children and therefore cannot be utilized to their full capacity. The skips are smaller containers and do not have covers and therefore produce contaminated water during rains and become the breeding ground for disease and vectors like mosquitoes and flies. Collection from storage areas are taken to dumping sites. Private sweepers also collect the waste stored outside or inside the houses or shops with their hand carts, and dump the waste into the storage bins. Waste is transferred to the storage points by household or shopkeepers themselves, and private companies also collect the waste from house to house using vehicles. A case study was conducted for the second largest city in what we know as Lahore, and the study collected data which is represented on this table. The data indicates that the largest contributor to waste in Pakistan is organics with a 67.02% statistic.
Pakistan also lacks longevity practices for produce such as refrigeration transport, which causes food to spoil quicker after harvest. Food waste is estimated to account for up to 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, according to the United Nations article from 2023. The significant levels of carbon dioxide are due to food production, transportation, and handling. Additional greenhouse gases such as methane are also released when food biodegrades in landfills. Food waste can be linked to nutrient waste, as food that is discarded and lost are missed opportunities for diverse diets to be available to people who need the nutrients. Incorrect disposal of food waste can cause immediate danger to human health. It creates a breeding ground for bacteria and can attract vermin and parasites that may also spread viruses and diseases. About 1/3 or 1.3 billion tons of produce produced for human consumption gets lost or wasted every year, according to the United Nations Environmental Program report conducted in 2021. We found that organic waste was a main concern and worked to find economic and efficient solutions that could be integrated within Pakistan society.
After researching multiple solutions implemented in other countries, we found black soldier fly larvae farming aligns with Pakistan's sustainable development and goals by addressing waste management, food security, and environmental sustainability. Black soldier fly larvae offers a high-quality protein source that can replace traditional feed ingredients like fish meal. This not only reduces costs, but decreases reliance on environmentally taxing feed sources. This larvae also efficiently converts organic waste into valuable fertilizer, sustainable agricultural practices while simultaneously addressing waste management issues. Chitin and biodiesel are extracted from the larvae farming, provided additional economic and environmental benefits, contributing to a circular economy and renewable energy sector. Establishing facilities for larvae farming requires significant investment and infrastructure to sustain an entire life cycle of the insects. This includes facilities for egg laying, larval rearing, and processing of byproducts. Ensuring a consistent supply of organic waste for larval feed is crucial. Streamlining resources allocation and establishing partnerships with waste management authorities are essential steps. Looking ahead, by investing in black soldier fly larvae farming and related industries, Pakistan can create new economic opportunities while simultaneously addressing pressing environmental and agricultural challenges. Larvae farming addresses waste management challenges by converting organic waste into valuable resources. It enhances food security by providing a sustainable protein source for animal feed, reducing dependency on imports. Larvae farming also promotes environmental sustainability by reducing greenhouse emissions and offering renewable energy sources. It creates economic opportunities through infrastructure development and production of valuable byproducts. Aligning with sustainable development goals, black soldier fly larvae farming supports Pakistan's effort in waste management, agriculture, and economic growth. We would like to thank the MSL faculty for their support, and thank you to Professor Anna for her guidance in this project and throughout the course. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from the crowd? Okay.
This is a selfish question because those of us who work on the curriculum like to get feedback about the classes. What made you guys take this class? And that's the first part of the question. And the second part is, what are you going to take with you from the class?
Okay, so I took the class because I'm pre-med and I'm really interested in nonprofit work. So health and human rights was kind of the perfect intersection for me. And then you said what we took away from the class. What I took away from the class was we learned a lot regarding environmental disparities across the world. And I think that's something that I haven't really thought about that contributes as much, like I knew it contributed to health impacts as much as, but not as much as we learned in the class. And we learned about just how terrible the situations are and how more developed countries can implicate less developed countries and cause those people to suffer, but because of that, like no one is really giving attention to that because they don't have the resources or the attention to take care of it. So what I'm going to take away is that I want to pursue nonprofit work in the future. So this will definitely be, there will be definitely aspects from this class that I'll consider in my future work.
I also took this class because I majored in bio, so we learned a lot about them being as separate topics, of medicine being one and bio being the other. But I think this class kind of brought both together in the environmental aspect of that it really does affect you no matter who you are and where you come from, because it's also within our own country, within our own backyards, just like here in the city of Chicago. We often see it even in places like Flint, Michigan, where their water sources are unsafe. And I would take away that I would also want to change that, whether it be in my own home or across the world. But it is important because it does affect anyone.
For me, I found out during the class that like a climate refugee isn't, like it's not a consideration for refugee status. So if someone's leaving their home due to environmental factors, they wouldn't get the like they wouldn't be granted as a refugee. And I thought that was interesting because there's other factors that, like, there are many factors that cause someone to leave their home, and I thought climate was a big one, and knowing that it's not one of the changes, like one of the challenges that they have, was interesting to learn. And I think our professor did a great job at teaching us like the disparities within the healthcare field and also within law, and I really enjoyed it.
So for me, I wanted to go into the medical industry specifically in research, so I wanted to learn more about how that can be incorporated with like health and human rights. And so taking the class, there was a lot of information that was very eye-opening, specifically like regarding lead poisoning, or even understanding legal implications and health implications both nationally and internationally. We had to do individual projects comparing different countries. So for me, I did Cuba and Chile, and just looking at how different it is from developed countries and undeveloped countries, and just understanding those differences and trying to possibly incorporate what we learned into our careers in the future.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, let's give another round of applause for our first presentation. All right, our next presenter is Anjali Patel. Her presentation is called From Idea to Product, Creation of a Medical Device.
Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about a glimpse into the world of medical devices. So, good morning. So picture this morning I'm in full symposium mode, scrambling to get everything sorted before time. Amidst the chaos, I say, I can't find my glasses, let me just wait, I'll find them later. So, I think it'll be okay, everything will be okay. Well, this led to a funny chain of events, including an unexpected collision with the wall, the need for a bandage, and the embarrassing realization that my clothes were inside out. So, bottom line, glasses are important, but you know what else they are? They're considered medical devices. My medical device class really inspired me to make this presentation because medical devices are everywhere, especially in the healthcare environment, from hospitals to clinics. Think pacemakers, surgical endoscopes. As someone aspiring to be in the medical field, I understand that I'll always be in contact with these essential products and devices. Their efficiency and dependability are absolutely critical, emphasizing the importance of regulation. But they don't just have to be limited to the medical environment. Within my story, I came across two different medical devices. The first was glasses, or I didn't find them. The second one was bandages. Today, I'm excited to share insights into the world of medical devices, from defining what they are, exploring examples, and discussing the crucial role of FDA regulation. Understanding how these devices work, how they're classified on risk, submission pathways, and class is very essential for everyone. Okay, so I'm going to talk about what is a medical device. According to the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the medical device does the following. It diagnoses disease, it can cure, mitigate, treat, prevent a disease or a medical condition, and it also affects the structure or function of animals and humans. But it does not include software functions, however, there are exceptions. So a digital app may count, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in depth. Okay, so now that I talked about what a medical device is, I have a little game. I have 3 options, and you guys, if you could just raise your hand and say, yes, I think this is a medical device, yes, this is not a medical device, and then we can talk about it. I'll also provide a little insight about the device, just in case that, okay. So the first one, we're gonna go from left to right. So the first one's a Fitbit. And this device is used to tell you about your physical activity, how many steps you took, calories you burnt, sleeping, can monitor your heart. So do you guys think this is a medical device, according to the FDA definition? Yeah? No. Okay, that's okay. I was confused at first too. When Professor Folwell presented this in class, I was like, you know, it kind of monitors stuff, so it could prevent something. However, according to the Fitbit website, it's more so product as a wellness device, because on the website it says it's not used to prevent, diagnose disease, because it has these statistics, but it can't do much besides provide you with just statistics. Okay, so the middle one, this might be obvious, but I wanted to give an example that everyone has seen. And so yeah, so glucometer, what do you guys think? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, so general consensus, yes, that makes sense, right? It monitors our glucose levels through blood samples. Okay, so now this next one. I kind of talked about a little bit before, but it's a digital app. And I learned about this in my health informatics class. And when I learned about it, I was confused, but then I was like, wow, I didn't know it would be classified like this. So I'll give a little insight about it. But what it does is it helps users monitor their fertility cycle. And what it does is it uses hormone-driven temperatures to determine an individual's daily fertility. So what do you guys think? Is it a medical device or is it not? You don't know? Okay, that's okay. I had the same reaction in class because at first it was an app. This is fully digital. And in my head, it was like, oh, a device has to be somewhat tangible. However, this is the first FDA-approved pregnancy monitor birth control app. And so what it does is it basically will tell you today you're fertile and today you're not. So what it does is it's trying to prevent a medical condition, and according to FDA, that medical condition is pregnancy. So now that we talked about what a medical device is, examples of medical device, let's talk about FDA. FDA is this regulatory body, and it reviews products, it issues warning letters, it talks about product recall, and it also bans certain products that don't comply with FDA regulations. So the FDA oversight may involve reviewing information about prior products, and these can be marketed as a 510K or a PMA. A 510K is a pre-market notification submission made to the FDA to demonstrate the device is marketed as safe and effective, and a PMA is a pre-market approval, and we'll talk more about this and what kind of class devices these submission pathways fall under. So a class 1 device, there's class 1, 2, and 3. And a class 1 device and a 510K exempt device doesn't have to have FDA review unless there's something going on. The FDA is like, oh, this may be critical to patient safety, let's check it out. And additionally, FDA is involved in just reviewing documentations to ensure patient safety. They'll also test certain products as well. Okay, so now that we talk about FDA's role, when do they really come in and play an impact into patient safety? So I have an example. This is EV3, and this is a medical device manufacturer company, and it sells neurovascular medical devices. And this medical device in question is considered the Onyx, a liquid embolic system, and it's used for the brain. So how this works is this device surgically injects into blood vessels and blocks the flow to arteriovenous malformations in the brain. And arteriovenous malformations are basically an abnormal connection between arteries and veins, and this usually occurs in the brain. So what was so bad about this, right? What could have possibly done that the FDA had to get involved? Well, we know that it's approved for the brain and the brain only, but what representatives did is they went to surgeons and they said, hey, it can also be used for other areas. However, this was not FDA approved and it was outside the approved scope. But these representatives were given rewards. Illegal monetary rewards. So they tried to convince surgeons, given instructions that weren't even approved. And so this dealt with patient safety and also illegal monetary rewards. So the FDA stepped in, and they first said, you know, it's okay what you're doing, just give us more data. Let's make sure it's safe, give a PMA, have clinical research to back it up. But EV3 decided not to comply with anything the FDA said, and therefore they were fined around $17.9 million in fines and fortitude. So this shows that the FDA is really involved and they care about patient safety. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about classes. Different class medical devices fall under. There's class 1, 2, and 3. And when it comes to risk, I like to think of it as you increase in class, you increase in risk. So when it comes to class 1, these products are typically associated with low risk. These products don't require 510K. And you kind of see them everywhere. They're bandages and they're non-electric wheelchairs. Okay, so now let's move on to class 2. When it comes to class 2, these are considered a little bit more on the riskier side, right? These devices require a pre-market notification, and most medical devices we think of, like a blood pressure cuff or a powered wheelchair, those fall under this category. And to obtain a 510K, the product must significantly be similar to other devices that already have a 510K documentation. Lastly, let's talk about class 3. Now, these are the more riskier ones, and they have to do with something, these devices have to do with something that involves supporting life or sustaining life. And they can be implemented, and they have potential unreasonable risk of injury or illness. So most of the times, a PMA is required, and to qualify for a PMA, you need clinical research. So examples we see in our daily lives: breast implants or implantable devices. Okay. So what I want you guys to take away from this is that medical devices are everywhere, whether we know or not, and it's important to first know why something is a medical device, because it typically has to do with patient safety. So if you guys see something that doesn't qualify against FDA regulations, say something, because it's really important. Thank you. And I'd like to thank the MSL staff and also Professor Followell for all their help.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? I have one online. Oh, Jeremy, go ahead, please. No, go for it.
Yeah, so I think there are definitely apps out there, but again, when it comes to apps, FDA is pretty much strict on what goes on, because if you think about it, it's kind of, once they're out there, it's in the hands of the consumer, so there's not much regulation on in terms of like a company besides the things they can implement in the app. But I know when it comes to like actual devices, they're trying to get like different blood testing devices to be considered under certain classes, so there's more regulation.
All right, we have one question that said, you mentioned the EV3 company, and they're wondering sort of why might a company not comply with the FDA?
So I think it depends. Some companies, depending on their size, right, they think they might be able to get away with it, or also if something's so big, right, the FDA has to put a lot of time and resources into stopping the company having product recall, and also sometimes it's just a fine. And I know how bad that sounds, but companies really, again, they're business motivated, right? They care about profits. If they just simply have to pay a fine, they'll go about it and continue. But the FDA is trying to get stricter regulations, so that way patient safety is the first thing these companies think of.
How much of it depends on what the company says or represents? So let's say they have an app and it does give away, it does look into medical information that might implicate FDA regulation, but they don't warrant that. They don't promise that. They don't say it does that. How much of the FDA role depends on what the company warrants versus what the device actually does?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when it comes to the FDA's attention first, when you're going through all the documentations, it's basically what the company says, right? It's word of what the company says, and it's, if this is what the company says and this is documentation provided, then we're good. However, if there's issues that come up, consumers, users, different competitors bring it up to the FDA, then they'll go look into it and then see does what they say align with what they're doing.
All right, thank you so much. Are there any more questions? Let's give a good round of applause for Anjali. Okay, our next presenter is Ekena Onwobiko, and her presentation is entitled Organ Donation Policies in the U.S.
Good morning, everyone. My voice is a little cracky because I'm a bit sick. But for some context as to why I chose this topic, I'm an aspiring physician. I'll be starting med school this fall. And I joined this program initially to understand the legal sides of health and be involved in health policy to be a better advocate for my patients in the future. But since joining this program, I've fallen in love with other aspects of law like patents and also the business side of things. This topic, however, is one of the many ways that understanding the legal sides of health would promote health equity. So I thought it was very fitting for my aspirations. Okay. So how do organ donation policies affect us? Organ donation policies are important because they can increase the frequency of organ donations, which can lead to organs being available and fewer deaths on the wait list. Right now, we're seeing a greater gap between the demand and supply for organ donations, and this has affected minority communities, so effective policies could help promote health equity. Black people are 4 times as likely to develop kidney failure than white people, but they are less likely to receive a life-saving kidney transplant. So this graph is from the United Network of Organ Sharing, and it shows the donation waitlist demographics as compared to the normal population. So the yellow line is the percentage of the normal population, and the red line is a percentage of the people on the wait list. And we see that Black people make up 6% of the population for this area, which is Wisconsin, and make up 26% of the people on the waiting list for organ donations. So what are the reasons for these disparities? Number 1 is organ matching. While other races can donate for organs, it is more likely that people of the same race would donate organs to each other because of the genetic similarity. So if there's no diversity in the donors of organs, then the people who are not represented in organ donations are less likely to receive them. There are also socioeconomic factors, like the racial and ethnic minorities often face barriers that disable them from accessing healthcare as equally. These barriers include lower income, lack of insurance coverage, and limited access to facilities. And these could delay things like tests that will enable them to be on the organ donation wait list. There's also a history of cultural beliefs and mistrust. Some racial groups or minority communities just don't trust the healthcare system enough to donate their organs, and that could be for many reasons, also like historical context of the healthcare system failing these groups in the past. There's also issues like disease burden. Some ethnic groups are more likely to have certain diseases that will require them to have organ donations, making them more likely to be on the wait list. So what are the organ donation policies? So we're going to cover the types of organ donations, which are the living donations and the deceased donations, which are just in the name. If someone is living and donates their organs, that's considered a living donation, and a deceased donation is from a person who has passed away. So in organ donations, there are also consent procedures. There's opt-in, opt-out, and mandate choice. For an opt-in system, that means a person must explicitly show that, express their consent to become organ donors. And this typically requires registering by state. And this is done in places like the UK and in most states of the US. In an opt-out system, there's presumed consent. And this means that people have already consented unless they explicitly indicate that they do not want to be an organ donor. And this is seen in places like Austria and Spain. For a mandate choice, that means that people are required to make a decision to opt in or opt out. This can be done while they are filing their taxes or getting a driver's license. And people cannot leave this question unanswered, and the goal is to ensure that everyone at least has the option to choose. So while these consent procedures can change organ donation outcomes, there are other policies that are involved in this as well. Number 1 is government funding, population education programs, leaves of absences for donors, first-person consent laws, and tax benefits for donors. So there was a study done analyzing these policies. The 2015 study that I saw was the most robust one, and I'll be going into that. So for government funding, this is the funding that the government used for recruitment activities such as community outreach, workplace campaigns, and hospital-based interventions to encourage organ donations. What they saw here was that this actually statistically significantly improved the positive impact on organ donations. There was a 5.3% increase in the number of organ donations as compared to before. For population education programs, this is basically spreading awareness on organ donations through public schools and driver education courses. This did not show a statistic significance as expected, and there are many reasons why people thought this may have happened. Maybe the education programs were not as robust. The leaves of absences for donors, this is basically an unpaid leave for donors who need time to recover after their donations. So from this, they saw a 4.1 increase, but this was not really a statistical significance, but it was still like a small increase. And for first-person consent laws, this is basically when a person consents to donate their organs after they pass away. They don't need a family member to consent after they have passed away. So from this law, we saw that there was an increase, a 4.9 increase in the number of deceased donors per capita. And for tax benefits for donors, this provides tax incentives for donors and deductives, and the study did not find a statistical significance for organ donations. So while these policies showed what would increase organ donations, promoting equity is very different. So this is basically targeting specific demographics who are impacted by these the low supply of organ donations. So the government implemented this act called the National Organ Transplant Act. And this is basically an act that was used to address the organ donations and the transplantation system. So they also established the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. And this is a nonprofit organization under the contract with the HSS, and it's to ensure fair and equitable allocation of donated organs to maximize the utilization of available organs. So while this is a good step forward, there are studies that have shown that they have not been as effective as they should be in these current times. So a way to make these organizations effective is to elevate the voices of the populations facing the disparities in these spaces. So the OPTN has the organ procurement organizations, and these people make these policies for organ donations, but there's not a lot of representation in these groups. So one of the main ways to help with these policies is to get the people from these minority communities to be the voices in the policy making. Also, another way is to identify and publish a comprehensive HHS strategy that includes requirements, regulation, payment structures, and other changes aimed at eliminating disparities in transplantation, and also hold the HHS accountable in achieving equity within 5 years. So this is also a way to help promote equity that, or for communities that are specifically affected by these lack of supply in organ donations. So for future directions, one of the main ways that we could promote equity besides policy ways is exploring organ donation algorithms. So there's a way that people are selected to be moved off the wait list, and a new way that we could promote equity is incorporating social factors into these algorithms to make sure that people who are, to make sure that certain communities are more prioritized in the list so that they have more chances of getting out of the wait list. And another way of doing this is identifying more long-term effects, which is personally what I want to do for my independent study, by looking at the current policies and seeing the long-term effects of that, and working on that and informing policy work in the future. Also closing the gap in information available for organ policies, which is also one of the ways that I'm going to work on my independent study, is to basically fill in the gaps of information that we don't know about these organ donation policies and use that to inform policy. Thank you.
All right, any questions from the audience? We have one
on Zoom.
I know, somebody over there has one of these.
Oh, here, I'll do it. I'll give him mine.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick question about opt-in versus opt-out systems. I'm curious what your thoughts are on opt-out systems and the likelihood that the U.S. would ever adopt a policy like that. I know that there's some understandable pushback to something like that. I just want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do think it's unlikely with our political climate that the U.S. would adopt an opt-out system, and also because of many reasons, but also because of the issues we have in like the socioeconomic barriers of some people just not having the access to opt out as easily as other people. So I think right now the most effective consent law for me that I believe is a mandate choice, so that way everyone can be able to at least pick.
The question online was very similar. Was sort of wondering about, obviously, probably the opt-out choice leads to the most donations, but how does that sort of compare to the mandate choice in terms of effectiveness and the amount of donations that are happening?
Yeah, so actually Illinois recently, I think like 4 years ago, implemented the mandate choice, and they saw like, I think it's twice as much as the national average for organ donations, which is kind of what my independent study is going to focus on. So I think for opt-out, there would definitely be more organ donations, but just for the safety of everyone, so that everyone has a choice to, or easy access to opt-out, because there's some people that might just not have the like resources to go to a place to opt out, just for basically for privacy reasons also, because we don't know how that would be implemented, that an opt-in system or a mandate choice system right here in the US would be better. But I know countries like Austria are doing an opt-out system, and it's been working for them. So if there's other ways to do it in a safer way in the US, then I believe it would be better.
Thank you. Other questions?
What do you think is the best way to mobilize action in this area? It seems like the last legislative thing you put up there was like 1984, so I don't know, it was old. How do you get people to act in this area? Who are the stakeholders, the constituencies, and who can provoke or come together to create action in this area?
Yeah, so I think it could be honestly anyone, because a lot of the paper that I got this, the act from, which said that there needs to be more representation in the, needs to be more representation in the OPTN, which is the organization that is used to promote organ donation equity. Some of them are physicians, some of them are policymakers. So I think it's just anyone that's educated in the area that can show proof of to why certain policies are more effective. And also representation, like I mentioned earlier, like the people that understand the disparities and how it's affecting certain communities should be the voices in the policy space. So I think if we prioritize that, then we would see a closer gap.
So basically, MSL students and you, do you think you'll stay involved with this issue?
Yes, I do.
All right, thank you so much. All right, our final presenter in this session is Manoli Aya. She's presenting Health Economics, Understanding the Landscape of Fertility Treatments.
Okay. Hi, my name is Manoli, and I'm here to present on infertility insurance and how it affects the United States. So this is a topic that is close to my heart, because for many of you who don't know me, I'm an IVF child. All my cousins are IVF children. So without this technology and without access to coverage, I wouldn't exist, and neither would my cousins. And so today I'm just going to give you a high-level walkthrough of what infertility is, why it matters, a little bit about the Alabama and IVF debate that's currently going on, and then a classic infertility case study on Massachusetts, and then a progressive case study on New York, and then I'm going to wrap it up by what I think is needed to build a better law. So let's start off by what is infertility. Infertility is defined as a disease that affects both men and women, and that is defined by 12 months of regular intercourse that fails to produce in a child. This definition was created by the World Health Organization, and many states across the United States have adapted this definition into their policies. Let's talk about why it matters. So, 19% of women across the United States experience infertility. That means 32 million women across the United States have experienced infertility or are currently experiencing infertility. But there's also repercussions. So for example, in the United States, we are made up of multiple cultural backgrounds. And in many different cultural backgrounds, there is a social stigma of infertility. This means that women who cannot reproduce are viewed as useless and are viewed as sort of like a side piece in a sense. And so this can create feelings of depression, it can create issues in a marriage leading to divorce, and in some extreme cases, it can lead to suicide. We also see infertility affect how economics run. So for example, Minnesota determined that by 2030 that they would have a dwindling population and a diminishing workforce. So their strategic solution to that was to incentivize people from different states to move to Minnesota to replenish the workforce and promote childbearing. However, that doesn't necessarily work because IVF is so expensive and having children is so expensive. So for one cycle of IVF, it'll cost the average person $12,500 per cycle. And doctors have said that it takes about 3 to 6 cycles of IVF to produce a viable pregnancy. That means most average people will have a financial burden of upwards of $50,000 to have a child, and this does not include egg preservation, it does not include sperm preservation, and it does not include the storage of your gametes. This informs really who is able to have children then across the United States. Due to the financial burden of IVF and childbearing, this means only the upper middle class and the wealthy can afford to have children, meaning that we start to lose diversity in our demographics as only a certain group of people can reproduce. I wanted to touch a little bit about the Alabama and IVF debate because I think this really informed my independent study and why I chose to do this topic. So from my perspective, the ban on IVF in Alabama is sort of due to what is seen as life and what is not seen as life. And while I don't have the qualifications to determine that definition, I do think that many people in the state of Alabama do not agree with what state legislatures and policymakers are trying to put forth. So I think having comprehensive coverage laws can definitely protect those who do not agree with how Alabama views this topic. I wanted to show you this graph about the IVF coverage across the United States. So as you can see, in orange, those are all the states that offer the most comprehensive plans. And in total, 21 states in some capacity offer women and men the ability to have coverage for their family planning. So this could include IVF, this could include different procedures like artificial insemination, this could include egg preservation for cancer patients, this could include gamete preservation for cancer patients. And I wanted to make note that while 21 states have enacted some type of coverage, they're not all the same. So for example, for all the states in orange, these states have said that after 1 year of trying, all people under large group insurances are able to access infertility coverage in some capacity. However, states like Hawaii have said that most patients will have to wait 5 years or more before they have access to some type of IVF coverage or some type of IVF procedure. This really shows you the disparities and the inequality of what states deem to be an issue of infertility. And this brings me to Massachusetts. I consider Massachusetts to be a classic infertility law because it was one of the earliest laws passed in the United States, but it is also one of the laws that has not seen any amendments and has not seen any changes since its passing. So in 1985, Massachusetts became the second state across the United States to implement the most comprehensive coverage plan by procedure. So this means that Massachusetts has covered nearly every single family planning procedure, such as IVF, egg preservation, artificial insemination, you name it, they probably have it covered under their statute. But what this law does not cover and does not address is who has access to these treatments. They do not address the types of groups that are in need of these treatments. They do not address the incomes. They do not address the type of insurance plans you need to have these treatments. And this creates a massive problem. So as you see on the graph, in 1987, 100% of all women and men under large insurance group plans were deemed to be covered for IVF or for some type of infertility coverage. But in 2020, only 36% of those 100% have now covered. And this is due to insurance companies finding massive loopholes in the Massachusetts statute. So by not explicitly stating that unmarried women can have access to treatment, insurance companies were able to exclude them. By not stating that more than one cycle of IVF is covered, they were able to exclude women who could not have a viable pregnancy after one cycle. By also not defining what one cycle of IVF means, this means that insurance companies were able to define their own version of one cycle. So in this case, Massachusetts declared that insurance companies within Massachusetts declared that one cycle of IVF meant really just the removal of the egg from the female's ovaries and the insemination of a male semen in a petri dish. That was one cycle, did not include implantation. And under most medical care, one cycle is the entire loop. So that means from egg retrieval to insemination to then implantation. And by not defining this one cycle in their statute, insurance companies were able to exclude a large percentage of people who needed essential coverage. This also meant that by not defining any circumstantial cause of infertility, such as cancer patients were also not covered under this statute. And this creates a huge issue because this creates an inequality between patients and between different groups of people. So I wanted to then talk about New York, as New York is one of the most progressive states in the country to have comprehensive coverage. So unlike Massachusetts, New York has passed their law in 2019 through a budget bill, which was done to ensure that there was enough money in the budget to cover any demands that insurance companies had and any issues that insurance companies had with providing this coverage. But it also serves as a representation that by including infertility coverage in insurance mandates, that there's not really a depletion of resources. Also, unlike Massachusetts, New York uses very careful language to address both procedures and demographics, so it does not leave out groups like unmarried women, it does not leave out groups like the LGBTQ+ community, it does not leave out groups who are lower income, and it does not leave out groups such as cancer patients who, unfortunately, when they go under chemotherapy, lose the ability to reproduce. What is also unusual is New York has extended infertility coverage to Medicaid recipients. This means that lower income patients on Medicaid, especially those who are affected by cancer, have the ability to preserve their eggs without the financial burden that it would be if they did not have this coverage. However, New York also still has a lot to work on because these laws really only cover either the Medicaid group or only cover those who are covered under large group insurances. They do not cover patients who are either self-employed, who have self-funded insurance plans, and they do not cover mid to small size businesses across the United States, across New York. And this creates an issue because, again, only a certain group of people have coverage. So how do you build an ideal law? How do you include LGBTQ+ communities? How do you include Medicaid recipients? I think a lot of this has to deal with how you write the language of your law and how you're able to negotiate with insurance companies to include different demographics of people. So this means adapting what New York has done and extending your mandate to include demographics of people like who have coverage, having a whole section about LGBTQ+ community members, having a whole section about unmarried women, unmarried men, having a whole section about men who are in homosexual relationships with each other, having a section about those who are on lower income, and having a section about age restrictions. We have to define who has the ability to have children from what age to what age. But I also think this means you have to be able to negotiate with insurance companies. You have to be able to sit down with these different insurers and start to plan out, how are you going to cover this? Why do we need it to be covered? And then coming up with innovative solutions to build a more comprehensive plan. And I want to say thank you to Professor Sanders, who helped me develop this independent study and who will continue to help me develop this independent study as I leave the MSL program. And I'd also like to thank the MSL program for supporting my study. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yeah.
Thanks so much, Manoli. That was super informative. I am curious to know if any of the insurance plans that you saw that do cover IVF also cover surrogacy. Are they completely separate? Do they ever overlap? Just curious to know what you found out.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So actually, according to insurance companies, infertility and surrogacy are quite two separate things. So IVF is not considered to be surrogacy. And the issue with that is, of course, it all comes down to finances. Surrogacy is just far more expensive. I think on average it can cost about $100,000 to have a child through surrogacy. There's also the implication that you are bringing in a third party into it, so there's a liability issue that insurance companies just don't want to take. So I think there's a lot of nuances that need to be really sifted through before there's any action on that front. But I do think it is being pushed for. I know Virginia has tried to push for it. It failed, but there was a push for it.
So in order to be eligible for IVF coverage, like in certain states, you need to show you've been trying for 12 months. So what kind of like documents insurance company need like to truly show like you've been trying for the past 12 months?
Oh, absolutely. So I think there's a bunch of different situations. So of course, if you're a cancer patient, that documentation is quite, I don't want to say easier to get, but it's more producible because they can run the test and they can just say that due to cancer treatment, you are, in a sense, unable to reproduce. So I don't think that 12-month plus timeline applies to that subset of people.
Okay.
Because anyways, they're going through egg preservation most likely first. But as far as an average patient who has not had any medical conditions, a lot of it is just documentation, going to your OB, getting the tests done, and continuously like showing that there's a consistent abnormality that causes you to not have children naturally.
Okay, thank you.
Manoli, did you find any common themes among sort of policy advocacy in these states that was different from other cases that you looked at? Like, do you think there was grassroots movement that caused this, or do you think it was just political consensus?
So a lot of my initial research came from Resolve, which is an organization across the United States that supports reproductive rights for men and women. And so they were really sort of the grass movement kind of group that brought the attention to these issues, to these gaps in coverage. So I know when when Illinois State passed its mandate, a lot of it was in partnership with Resolve. Unfortunately, the chapter is now defunct in Chicago, but they were a big reason as to why there was a big push in the state for fertility coverage.
Oh, I'll bring my mic over here.
I had a question for like the Supreme Court's decision with Alabama of them seeing now embryo as a life. How do you think that that would affect like coverage and stuff? Because it would kind of be like in conflict with each other if because they would have to necessarily keep these embryos alive because they are now considered a life. So how would that work?
So if I go, I'm just gonna bring back this. So you can see, most states who have enacted this type of comprehensive coverage do not adopt the view that Alabama has currently. So as far as the 21 states that are covered or have some type of coverage, I don't see that there will be an issue moving forward. But for states who are now contemplating bringing insurance to the table and bringing infertility coverage to the table, I think it's going to be up to the policymakers, and I would say that physicians should also be included in this discussion about technically what is life and what is not. Again, I'm not qualified to answer that question in any means, but I do believe that there has to be some kind of roundtable discussion between insurance companies, policymakers, and physicians to come up with the most comprehensive coverage. So if this means that a state that doesn't necessarily see IVF as a foreseeable plan, then there are other options such as artificial insemination, such as intrafallopian insemination that could be used instead, which is then you're not playing with the question of what is life and what is not life.
Oh, okay, we'll take one more from the panel.
You were discussing, on the CIS slide, you were discussing that states are trying to adopt infertilities. And so is it equal between female infertility and male infertility, or is one prioritized over the other? Did you see anything about that?
Okay, so in my research, about 30% of all infertility cases are caused by male factor infertility. There's not quite a lot of research done. I wonder why on that one. But, sorry, I'm blanking on your question. But as far as the insurance laws go, as far as I saw, especially with the New York case, they're very inclusive in their language, so they do both address men and women. They both address the different relationships that men and women have. So they do address unmarried men, unmarried women. They address gay men, gay women. And so in that case, there is not, but I can see, and I would love to do further research on other states and how they sort of view that topic.
All right, thank you very much. Let's give a hand to Manoli and to all our panelists. It was a really fantastic presentation session. We're going to get started with our next session at 11 o'clock, so we've just got a few minutes, so stand up, stretch your legs, but stay close by, and we will see you soon.
Awesome. There were so many connections between what you guys talked about and then like the presentation. Yes. So smooth in terms of like stepping up. We practiced that. I like the way they introduced themselves. How's it going, Joy? Coordinate on that. You guys just listen, all of these. Oh, good. Really good. I'm so glad you guys came forward to present because it really adds something. And like, no, I mean, you guys worked on yourself so from our super happy conversation. Well, that's transformed. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad for you. Did you see me? I fell out of my pocket. I just went shit.
Are y'all like on a break right now?
Yeah, just for like a couple minutes.
Okay.
We're going to start again in 20 seconds.
Okay.
Amazing.
Great job.
I had a fever this morning.
Did you take something?
Yeah, I took Tyler.
Oh, if you need to go, take a nap. Recharge. I did not do this.
All right, we're going to get started. I'm going to ask the next group of presenters to come on up and grab a seat. And our first presentation for this next block is Sonali Bhakta, and she's presenting Navigating Privacy Regulations in Education, Compliance Challenges, and Best Practices. So welcome, Sonali.
I'm gonna put this away. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Yes. Okay, good. Clicker. Do I click on it? Oh, maybe they're like getting food. Totally fair. No, that's so fair. I would be them too. It will be me after this presentation. Yeah. I'm sorry. Did that close? Just Cam. What's new? Okay, cool. Ready? Okay, cool. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sonali Bhakta, and I'm a full-time residential student here in the MSL program. Prior to this program, my primary interests lied in STEM education and biochemistry. But after completing the program, and I'm going to be graduating in a few days, I realized that I have interests in privacy law and data security breaches. So for this presentation today, I'll be navigating you all through privacy regulations in education and talking to you about compliance practices, compliance challenges, and best practices that I've identified. Can I get a show of hands on who's ever filled out this form? It's FAFSA, if anybody cannot see. Great, that's a lot of people. That's actually most of the people in the room. Now, please raise your hand if you or a loved one has a Facebook account. Great, that's like literally everybody in the room. So you might be wondering at this point, what does FAFSA and Facebook have in common other than starting with the letter F? Well, chances are, if you filled out a FAFSA in 2022, Facebook knows. On April 28th of 2022, The Markup, an investigative and data-driven website that primarily covers technology news, released this article. Applied for student aid online, Facebook saw you. Each year, millions of students apply for federal aid through the free application for federal student aid, otherwise known as FAFSA, which distributes over $112 billion every year. This application requires personal information such as tax information, family household income, and social security numbers. But why is Facebook involved? Well, Facebook created this code called the metapixel, which extracts information as soon as it's typed, such as names and emails, and sends that information right back to Facebook. Businesses like the North Face, Saks Off Fifth, Shopify, and Calendly all use this code on their websites to track and optimize performance for ad campaigns. But what does this have to do with FAFSA? Well, FAFSA is accessed through a government site, which should prioritize security and privacy. However, the markup revealed in January of 2022 that the metapixel was found on the FAFSA website. In a case study done by the markup, when a name like Surya Mathu is inputted into the FAFSA form, as you can see on the left, it is scrambled, which you can see on the right, and it is sent to Facebook. Once it reaches Facebook, it is then unscrambled. Now, you might be thinking, was the government even aware of this? You know, Facebook is ubiquitous. It's everywhere. It's in the air. When contacted for comment, Richard Cordray, who is the Chief Operating Officer of the Federal Student Aid, which is a division within the U.S. Department of Education, stated that as part of a March 2022 advertising campaign, the agency changed its tracking settings. This inadvertently caused some studentaid.gov user information that falls outside of the FSA's normal collection efforts, such as a user's first name and last name, to be tracked.
Now let's define what exactly is some user information. According to the FSA, the information that Facebook has access to is first name, last name, email address, and zip code. However, the markup conducted its own study, and the information gathered from the FAFSA application includes first name, last name, country, phone number, email address, and zip code. Now, you might be wondering, what would Facebook even do with this data? Well, according to reports, the data sent to Facebook was automatically anonymized and not used by either the FSA or Facebook. But if this was the case, then why was the code even embedded into the website? Moreover, the pixel functionality was deactivated after the campaign, but questions still remain about the timing. Somebody said January 2022, the other person said March of 22. What's up with the discrepancy? And what is considered typical campaign maintenance? When asked any other further questions, the department declined to respond. Now, this is a problem. First, personal data being shared without consent raises major privacy concerns. Applicants trust their sensitive financial information to be handled securely. Second, the revelation of data sharing highlights the lack of transparency in online practices. Many applicants, such as myself, were unaware that their data was even being shared with Facebook. Moreover, the data collected by Facebook could be used for targeted advertising, exploiting personal information without consent. Lastly, the involvement of the U.S. Department of Education in this raises questions about the trustworthiness of government systems and their ability to protect privacy. According to Comparitech, a website that uncovers large-scale cybersecurity breaches, there have been 2,691 breaches at educational institutions in the United States since 2005, with 81% of the personal record data breaches occurring at post-secondary institutions such as Northwestern University. Moreover, there have been 32 million personal records leaked in school data breaches since 2005. Now, when it comes to protecting student personal information and privacy, there is only one federal law, as mentioned yesterday by Stephanie Fine, FERPA. The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act is a federal law that protects the privacy of student education rights. FERPA grants parents specific rights regarding their children's education records, which transfer to the student once they turn 18 or attend a post-secondary institution. Now, are you wondering about these rights? Well, here's a breakdown. Parents and students can access and review all school-held educational records. They can prevent disclosure to third parties without written consent, and they have the right to request corrections to any inaccurate information. FERPA specifically applies to all federally funded educational institutions and protects all education levels. It covers academic, disciplinary, personal records in both paper and electronic forms. Now, FERPA is important because it safeguards student privacy by regulating educational information. It also ensures confidentiality, preventing unauthorized access, and it promotes trust through transparency and accountability. However, there are compliance challenges when handling FERPA. First, managing data archiving in education is complex, with decisions on what to keep, for how long, and accessibility to the data. Second, dealing with data governance complexity is difficult due to differing state and federal laws. Next, most schools do not have adequate data security measures in place. Despite having IT services, many educational institutions are not protected by encryptions or codes, leaving records susceptible to security breaches. And the final challenge lies in incident response planning. Many educational institutions lack comprehensive, regularly tested plans. Having explored the compliance challenges facing educational institutions, it's clear that safeguarding student data requires a multifaceted approach. Now let's shift our focus to best practices that can help institutions navigate these challenges effectively and enhance their data protection efforts. First, implementing EU GDPR principles like collecting only necessary data and allowing parents and students to request data deletion can enhance privacy. Next, strengthening data breach notifications is crucial. Currently under FERPA, if there is a data breach at a school, technically schools are not mandated to report that information leakage. I'd suggest developing data breach notification regulations to keep parents and students in the loop about their data. Furthermore, FERPA exceptions have not been updated since 2014. Updating FERPA exceptions to reflect technological advancements in online learning practices is essential. For instance, we could clarify when student info can be shared in emergencies and set guidelines for using digital tools. We also need to address how third parties handle student data. Lastly, continuous education ensures faculty and staff, parents and students stay informed about evolving laws and best practices, fostering a culture of accountability and enhancing student privacy rights. Now, I understand that these issues are on a large Capitol Hill-sized scale, if you will, but here are some things we can all do in our daily lives to protect student data privacy. We can educate ourselves and loved ones about FERPA. We can review privacy policies and consent forms, monitor online activity and privacy settings, and encourage open communication with educational institutions. I know I'll be implementing these suggestions in my life because when I need to fill out my little brother's FAFSA forms in 2 and 6 years, I don't want to be worrying about Facebook in the back of my mind, and you shouldn't have to worry about Facebook in the back of your mind either. Here are my references, and if you'd like to learn more, feel free to check out these websites. Thank you. Any questions? Oh, yeah, here.
Oh. Do you think educational institutions are incentivized to kind of maintain secrecy with respect to how they collect data? And if so, how do you think we can actually effectively combat that, especially at the legislative and societal level, which is ultimately the types of fixes that we need for this?
I definitely think that they're incentivized to protect their data because all schools kind of want the maximum amount of students they have at their school, so they want to make sure that their data is protected and they don't want to leak it, kind of like trade secrets, if you will. And I think the best way to start it is starting out small on a kind of citywide level, town legislation, and then building that up to state legislation. I think that's how all great movements are started, and if we can reflect that in our educational movements, we'll be able to do a good job. And positively affect to make change.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what we personally can do for preventative measures?
Well, like right now, for example, I have like a ton of ad blockers on my laptop, and I use like Tor browsers or DuckDuckGo, so my information is not tracked. And I think if you implement these daily small little things in your life, you can protect yourself and you can protect your loved ones from your data being breached.
Any other questions? All right, great job. Round of applause. Up next, we have Kristen Wovoda, and she's presenting Blinding Justice, a California Perspective. Welcome, Kristen.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Kristen Wovoda. I'm from Sacramento, California. I'm the Chief of Emergency Services. And in my time in this position, I've got to spend at our public defender's office when I can get my words together. And it's been an eye-opening experience for me, seeing what our criminal justice system is like and how that interfaces with our STEM program. So I'm going to go over some of the background, and some of this stuff is very obvious, and we all know about this, that our criminal justice system is an antiquated system that's built on racial oppression and discriminative policies. It goes all the way back to slavery, and we still continue that system going forward. It's unbalanced in the sense that funding goes more to prosecution and more towards putting people in jail than it does going to the public defender's office. So that's always going to be an issue that we're battling. And then the sad thing is changing our societal stigma around this. It is unfair that Black and brown individuals in our world are still just tolerated in society. And so we have to change those formats. So that's the obvious. Those are the obstacles that are way bigger than any of us. But we have to figure out where we start with that. And what kind of brought me here was this whole thing around denial. You know, denial is our major problem. It's inbred in how we do our American culture. If we don't like to accept it, if we don't like what it is, we deny it. And I think that is a big issue here, and something that really motivated me when I've been in the public defender's office is just seeing the denial behind all this stuff. I knew it existed, but it was eye-opening when I really started to see what was happening. So let's kind of go to the more positive side of this, what's happening. And this is a California perspective, since that's where I come from and where I've been spending time in the public defender's office. So the Racial Justice Act was an assembly bill that was passed and now is part of our penal code. The goal behind this is to eliminate discrimination and biases in our criminal justice system. The neat part about this is it's allowing us to go back in date, so any cases that have been prosecuted, we get to go back and review, and then anything going forward, there's been training and enhancements to ensure that these biases are removed out of the courtroom and then removed out of every other aspect of it. One thing that came up that kind of confused me, but also kind of was more fear-based here, is I asked the public defender, do we have data on the judges? Do we have data on our law enforcement agencies? Do we have data on the DA of how all this stuff is going? And they said, well, we do, but we don't want to cross that bridge. And we don't want to cross that bridge because it's going to open a whole nother can of worms. And being a public defender, we don't want to do that to our clients, which was really terrifying to me, that fear and denial is preventing us from going forward. Some of our bigger cities in California are starting to move forward with collecting data and presenting that, but in my county, they're really risk adverse and scared to do that. The other thing is, I've spent some time reviewing cases now. Very, very fascinating, super eye-opening, very disturbing, very disheartening. This one case that I've been reviewing, this individual was convicted at 19 for a gun charge. He was in a car with another individual, took off from the cops, young, not being smart, got sentenced to jail, served his time, got out on parole, 9 years clear of parole. Then somebody filed a charge saying he had a gun and discharged that gun in front of them. Throughout the whole case, very fascinating, many, many pages. But just to kind of summarize where this ended, there was no gun ever found. No one ever saw a gun, no witnesses had a gun, nothing in any police report. But then during the DA's closing statement, she goes, who carries guns? Dramatic pause. Drug dealers carry guns. This individual points at him, is a drug dealer. Obviously, he would have a gun. If he had a gun, then he would use it, because that's what drug dealers do. This guy has never had a charge of using drugs. There was nothing in this criminal case about drug charges. This was solely an ex-felon discharging a gun charge. He's spending 39 years right now in prison for never even having a gun on him. All because of a bias of the DA showing the jury that, of course, drug dealers carry guns. It blew my mind that this is happening in our criminal system and happening in California out of all places too. I feel that we're pretty progressive. The other thing that's happening is blind charging. My county, along with San Francisco, are two counties that have implemented this. It is now law, and all DAs across California must implement this, I think by 2026, so they have some time. But what they did is they paired up with Stanford's computer lab and created an algorithm that redacted information out of the charging paperwork that goes to the DA's office. So removing anything that could be a name, a location, anything that could cause a bias on how this person might be charged. I think it's great, but some concerns have come up since I've been playing around in the public defender's office, is one, the DA owns this information. The DA is the only one reviewing this information. Then the second thing I've seen when I've spent time in trials and watching arraignments and so forth, is as soon as they get to arraignment and things are dedacted at that point, then charges change. Once they see the person, then charges change. So it's not perfect, but it's a good step in the right direction, trying to remove these biases and discriminations taking place in our criminal justice system. So let's go off on what can we be doing and how does this intersect with STEM? So I am not a tech person. I'm a little bit more data scientific, and I think there's a lot of room here where STEM intersects with law and things that we could be doing to drive some change. And one of this is the data collection and analysis, putting this more in a third party, so using that DA concept of that they're blinding that data, but putting it outside of the DA's office, giving it to somebody else to look at, and somebody else to publish and give transparent data on that. We have to work on balancing funding. That's outside of our scope, but somebody has to work on balancing funding where not everything's going to the prosecution. We also need to figure out how we take that funding and realign it to put in more diversion programs, because we continue this really vicious cycle and not providing any outlets. I would love to see, this is the STEM part of it, expanding blinding justice. How can we take technology and take our brains to expand some of the stuff that's starting with charging and bring it to arraignment and pretrial? I don't think we can blind the whole court system, but I think there are ways we can try and drive societal change and stigmas by taking some of these information out of there and then kind of, in a sense, awakening them to the things that they don't realize that they're doing every day, these implicit biases that they're putting out there. Another one, probably a little bit above our heads, but I'm up for the challenge. I'm not sure where it's going to go. But legal reform. As I stated earlier in this, our legal system is an antiquated, old system based on racial oppression. And so we need to blow it up and start over again to really show what our society is and what our culture is. So addressing those systemic inequalities, changing our guidelines for charging and plea sentencing. Bail is a whole nother inequitable issue that's out there. Removing the sentence enhancement so people actually have hopes. And then I think the biggest one is how we get people back into society. That stigma that anyone who's been incarcerated is bad, not trustworthy, scary. All those horrible words we need to figure out how to eliminate from our vocabulary. Then going into another STEM intersection here, and we've heard some other people already talk about this last night and today, is the health equity and education equity. We have to take care of those disparities, and we have to come together and do that. And I think we do that by a transdisciplinary approach where we stop working in our silos and put our heads together and get more people in the room to really talk about what can we be doing to address this? What can we do with all this technology, all this great minds and work that we've done in all these different fields to bring together? Because if we don't address the health disparities, the education disparities, we're never going to be able to address the criminal disparities. And then the final step is the workforce engagement, is we need to create workforces that represent the communities we serve, but in the other way too, we have to figure out how to extend the ladder down. So we need to give people in these different communities opportunities to climb the ladder and have these different experiences, so that would play into our whole education equity. And so I think we have a lot of work to do here, and this whole time in the Public Defender's Office has just blown my mind on all the options out there to really drive meaningful change in our society. And I wanted to come here and present this to the MSL group because there's so many smart people in this group that's graduated this group, who are graduating this year, and I think we could really do some great change here and improve our society for the better. So I appreciate it, and thank you so much.
Questions for Kristen? Yeah.
This might be a bit of a difficult question, but it's very common for opponents of criminal justice reform to kind of couch their arguments in law and order, right? They'll say that, oh, these things will lead to an increase in crime. It'll lead to letting people out who shouldn't be out, quote unquote, right? So with that kind of very attractive message to people who are not as intimately familiar with the system or kind of these things as kind of many of us are here, how do you think you can craft a narrative that appeals to those who might be more on the outside of this type of debate, to get them to kind of build support for these types of necessary changes?
Ooh, that is a deep question there.
Feel free to answer as much as you're able to. You don't have to really. I'm just curious.
No, I think it's interesting. I think it goes back to that concept of denial and speaking up when you see something. I think there's just that basic grassroots thing. You don't have to have this understanding. I had not no understanding. I had limited understanding of the criminal justice system until I started playing in the Public Defender's Office. And then once I did that, I saw this stuff everywhere, but it wasn't just saturated in my world. And so, to take little things and be able to speak up for those people, and when you see something happening, or even ballot initiatives, there's a ballot initiative in my county right now where they want to add an enhancement for shoplifting, for petty shoplifting. Well, all that continues to do is perpetuate this cycle when most of the people who are doing like petty shoplifting, they're doing it for food and survival. So we're not attacking that root cause. And so that's where that whole imbalance of inequities continue to play into it, that disparities of health education, food, and so I think it's just looking, anytime you see something that doesn't seem right, say something, as silly as that sounds as a slogan, see something, say something, but, I think it starts there and just moving that momentum of education, like I said, that part of denial, we all see racism, we all see the suppression, we all see the disparities, but we're not educating each other on it and figuring out what we can do with it. I think it takes just a little moment of taking that time to say something, and then it could change the world.
Any other questions? Oh, we have a couple more.
Thought I was getting out of here.
Not off the hook that easy.
I'm just curious about what your advice is to government workers who have been doing the processes in the same way for decades even, to the point where they don't even realize how they do things. It's become almost like a muscle memory. How do you break that habit or even just give that awareness?
I think that goes to the transdisciplinary collaboration partnership, bringing more people into the room to have these discussions. Because if it's the culture I work in and that's all I've been exposed to, I'm not going to know anything differently. But if we start bringing other people in and start listening to what they also have to say and value their input and so forth, I think that will start driving that behavioral society culture change of being more aware. But I think it's a difficult one, and people have to be willing to be uncomfortable and also vulnerable to let them have these conversations and point out things. Hopefully my DA is not watching. But I asked him about his data, and he pretty much told me, go read about it, have a nice day. That's not going to drive change versus, being able to sit down and talk. I went about it about a very educational side of I'm just really interested in the data and understanding what you're doing with it. And I was pretty much, there's the door, have a nice day with it. And that's not going to drive change. I think what he's doing with blind charging is great, but obviously there's a link there, or a missing link, if he's not willing to sit down and talk about what's happening behind the scenes. So I think it's that interdisciplinary side.
One more question here.
So in the conclusion part, you mentioned we should focus on decreasing the barrier for an individual who has the crime records to reintegrate to the society. But don't you think that it's the after they committed the crime, they have to bear this kind of cost?
I think if you've broken the law, you must do and pay the price for the law you broke. But at the end of the day, we have to help them reintegrate into society. We know most people who gets released from jail or prison, the chance that they're going to get picked back up again and repeat the cycle continues to happen because they're still dealing with all the same disparities at the end of the day. And we're not building those bridges to prevent those disparities. If they're going to go out and steal, if they're going to get involved in drug dealing so they can make money, whatever it might be for their survival, we're failing as a society because we're not bridging those gaps and providing them those opportunities to actually get help or get a job or get out of the system that they're in. And I get, there's always going to be people who will be perpetual in the system. We can't save all or make this a perfect non-imprisoned world, but I think we can do a lot of really looking at how we can be kinder to humans in changing these policies that continue to perpetuate these discriminations and oppression in our society.
So currently, some kind of physician positions, if you have the crime records, if you are a sexual offender or you kill someone before, you can be a doctor or physician. Do you think it's a discrimination or it's a way to help us as a whole society?
That's a great question. This actually came up in California not too long ago about doing the same and allowing individuals who had previous felons of any type to become police officers and firefighters. And that caused a lot of concerns about safety and public safety. I think it's a case-by-case basis. I can't say I could say one person can't do it and another person can do it. I don't know the solution there. I think there should be abilities for people to reform and try again, but where do we draw that line? I don't know. That's why the interdisciplinary collaborations and bringing everyone to the table to discuss these matters and figure out what we can and can't do is where we need to start.
Okay,
so
thank
those
you.
are tough questions. Gosh, you guys are rough.
Thank you so much, Kristen. Great job.
Thank you.
For our next presentation, we have Kara Ferracuti with a presentation titled Regulatory Capture.
Hi everyone, my name is Kara Ferracuti and I'm a part-time student graduating this year. This is my 4th year in the part-time program. I have 5 years of experience working in regulatory compliance in the clinical trials industry. And the reason why I got into this industry to begin with was because I was really passionate about making sure that everything was right for the people, for the patients that we're treating on these trials. And that motivation for the public interest has really driven me throughout my career and my focus in the MSL program. And one of the things that I've always seen throughout my work is we always had this perception that regulators are very motivated to the public interest, that they don't trust things easily, that they're like we always want to do things ourselves, we always want to follow up on things and make sure stuff's being done right, and we're not easily inclined, so it feels like, to kind of buddy up with the people that are doing the work, because we want to make sure it's being done right regardless of regardless of anything else. But one of the things that I learned about in regulatory policy class that I took in the MSL program this year was a concept called regulatory capture. Regulatory capture is when a regulator is so-called captured by the industry that it's supposed to be regulating. So essentially, the industry can get the regulator to work in its favor. This is, of course, dangerous because it's essentially prioritizing the industry's interest above the public interest. And so one of the examples that's been pretty hot in the news over the last few years and also been brought up again lately is the example of Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration, which is what I'm going to be focusing on today. In the case of Boeing, there was very tight relationships between Boeing and the Federal Aviation Administration, and it really was almost as if the customer was Boeing rather than the people. So for one, Boeing, the Federal Aviation Administration really relied on the Boeing employees, because of course, if you're close to people, you're going to want to trust the people that you're close to. So because of that, they didn't really analyze things properly because of their trust with Boeing. And then also, one of the big issues is that the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, delegated some of its inspection functions to Boeing's engineers. So the FAA inspectors were essentially employed by Boeing. And so there's a concept called authorized representatives that they have where they report to not to the FAA, but rather to Boeing managers. So the safety reports are filtered through Boeing managers before being sent to the FAA. And so Boeing really has a lot of power over the aircraft certification. And so the Boeing employee, the Boeing employed. The FAA, aka Boeing, was facing a lot of pressure to limit safety analysis and testing. The FAA sided with Boeing on some safety issues that even were against what the FAA would normally do. The FAA was also, Boeing was also inappropriately coaching the FAA test pilots to reach a desired outcome. And the big issue that really led to a crisis was related to a safety software that could override pilots and push down the nose of a plane. So Boeing did not actually inform the airlines about this and removed references to it in their pilot operations manual. The FAA because of their relationship with Boeing, approved the installation of this software and also did not object to removing it from the manual. So pilots didn't know about this. So then that ultimately led to 2 crashes in 2018 and 2019, which you may have heard about, where the pilots lost control of their aircraft, and this was after that system that I mentioned was engaged. So, very bad outcome because of this, in large part at least, because of this relationship that they had between the two of them that caused the FAA's oversight to suffer. Then fast forward to earlier this year, they did make some changes, some response to try to accommodate for this, but then even this year, January this year, another plane lost a door plug during flight, and 4 bolts were missing. So it's definitely still a current issue that still needs to be resolved. So with this latest safety incident, it's really calling about like, how do we solve this problem, right? And the problem is really that conducting the oversight is, for one thing, expensive to the FAA, so it makes sense for them to delegate it. It's expensive. They would have to have a lot more engineers from the FDA, and also that you could argue that Boeing has expertise and FAA might not have the expertise to really be able to properly know what should be done, because Boeing, and so that's partially also why they would trust the Boeing engineers. But that experience with and expertise that is housed in Boeing should still be done under the oversight of the FAA. And so there's been more conversation, and I think that it's definitely important thing to push some of that more towards a third party rather than having Boeing continuing to exercise so much oversight power. Had to have those oversights and inspections by an independent third party, and this actually ties back full circle into my 2021 symposium that I gave for the MSL, where I was facing this problem in my work, where as regulatory coordinator, I was working with monitors from external monitors, and I was facing the problem of hey, they don't really have a lot of expertise, and they don't really all the time know everything about how we do things, and so in light of that problem, I was really advocating to have more of an internal presence for compliance within. But then, of course, this is something that you always have to keep in mind. It kind of even with me, I have to watch it very closely myself to make sure that I'm as objective as possible, right? And you can have, if you build out a whole team, at some point, it's not going to be objective, right? So I think there's 2 key takeaways from that. Is one is having a balance between the sort of the internal, if Boeing does their own oversight, as well as having that independent third party to make sure that to have both perspectives. So both me as an internal compliance person in my job, for example, and as well as the monitors and the regulators, having all these different layers of oversight to have the different perspectives. And 2, also really emphasizing the fact that as an internal within Boeing, making sure that is independent as possible. One of the things that we learned in my project management class that I also took in the MSL program was about ethics and how a project manager can really play a role in ensuring project ethics to make sure that it's not just the regulator that has that oversight responsibility, but that it's a mutual responsibility between the regulator and the business. And one of the ways that we can just, I think, help emphasize the importance of these issues, recognizing that the Boeing disaster has been, very, very bad, that there are a lot of risks, not just for the people, and not just for the public interest, but also keeping in mind the interest that people do have in ensuring proper oversight for the business, having the threat of that financial and reputational risk, as well as the trust in market position. And then on the side of industry, one of the other things we learned in regulatory policy was that that sort of thing can, the regulation can assure the the reputation of the industry. So really using that, we want to make sure that the regulation is aiding in that and ensuring that the reputation of the industry is, secure. So that way people will, continue to fly planes or sign up for clinical trials and all that sort of thing. Yeah, I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any.
Questions?
I also took regulatory policy, so this is very interesting to learn about. But for regulatory capture, specifically with Boeing, how do you see, is it that there's a lack of regulation in this space to prevent this thing from happening? Or like, how do you see that issue particularly going away in this field?
Yeah, so the problem isn't necessarily lack of regulation. Like, there is regulation, and like as I mentioned, there was the one issue, there was the issue of inappropriately coaching test pilots and going against what the Federal Aviation Administration's own guidelines were and what they were supposed to be doing. Like, they weren't even following that. So it's not an issue, not necessarily just an issue of the regulations. It's really an issue of of oversight and like actually following and making sure that those regulations are actually followed. So along with that, it just kind of goes back to the question of how do we make sure that the regulator is actually like doing what they're supposed to be doing. And so I mentioned at the end of my talk about emphasizing the risks and the importance of all of these issues, but then also just having that balance between both Boeing and also having independent third party, bringing in that independent third party is really like the key thing that would help to kind of resolve this problem.
We'll go to Cameron and then.
So like one thing we've learned is that it's oftentimes easier to regulate spaces that are more competitive, and obviously Boeing is like functionally, especially for like large body commercial aircraft, it's functionally a monopoly, right? It only has one other real competitor, and it's not even an American-based company. So that obviously gives Boeing more leverage over the FAA to kind of engage in these types of practices. So do you think there's an antitrust or anti-competitive element to this dynamic that makes this situation especially unique, or do you think that this is really more a question of regulation rather than antitrust?
Yeah, I think there's an element of Boeing being like too big to fail, sort of a situation of, because Boeing is so big and they have this reputation for they're like the big people in the industry they had long had this reputation for quality and safety. They have a lot of power and influence, so I think that also contributes to making it easier to form relationship for the FAA and Boeing to have this close relationship. But at the same time, having big business and having like this big company at this day and age is not necessarily it's not necessarily avoidable. It's kind of inevitable. So it's just like, how do we deal with it from there? And even if there are issues, like I think disclosure is another thing. Just being really transparent, talking about this topic, and just making sure that it's known, like, and understood it's an issue. Because, like I said, I never knew about even working in the compliance industry. I never knew even about regulatory capture before. So just kind of keeping it in mind as something to look out for, and encouraging discussion about it to make sure that we can solve that we can try to be forthcoming about it and address it as we can.
Hello. Okay. In your presentation, you mentioned the bolts missing from the door in the recent incident. Do you know if there are any new regulatory policies that were enacted after?
Yeah, so that was super recent, just in January of this year. So the discussion is still ongoing, and one of those things is mostly just with the issue of the fact that they're still delegating some of the agency's oversight responsibilities to Boeing employees is really the most concerning thing there. So I think addressing that, especially because this is now the second time in recent times that this has come up, then it's like, okay, it's not working. What they did before is not working, and they need to take more serious action to address it.
Hi, Kara.
Hi.
Great presentation. With both of our lines in work, you know, you were at the regulatory coordinator level, I'm at the IRB, and then we have all the regs, federal agencies. I'm just curious, did you ever look into whether the FAA or Boeing has their own ethical board? How does that work? Do you know?
Ethical? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think I really looked into their the ethical board aspect. I mean, more just from the perspective of that at least for Boeing internally, that they had like employees within Boeing that knew that there was something wrong, and like they wouldn't even fly on their own planes that they were working on. So it's just like, it's not even a question of like, do we need to assess ethics or anything? It's literally just a question of like, people are just so caught up in this system of working for like the business, and they were more concerned about the speed and the profit and the stock price and everything else, that like ethics is just, whether something is ethics, like not even, they just really, it was just really a question of oversight more so than like a complicated question of ethics.
So do you think they could probably benefit from having an ethical review board?
I think oversight is, because it wasn't really a question of what they should. It doesn't require really like a board to say like XYZ or whatever. It's really just the oversight itself, because the ethics were pretty straightforward. Like what they were doing, they knew they were doing what they were doing was wrong. They knew that like, you know, even the FAA as well FAA was accused of retaliating against whistleblowers, possibly obstructing the Office of Inspector General's investigation, failing to hold senior managers accountable, and allowing operation of improperly certified planes. Like it's really just a question of oversight, I think, more so than any sort of like board review of anything.
Gotcha, thank you.
Kara, thank you so much. Great presentation. Thank you. All right, up next we have Jamie Average. And her presentation is titled Empowering Change, the Creation of a Women in Sports Law Advocacy Firm. Welcome, Jamie.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Average, and I'm a full-time residential student in the MSL program here at Northwestern. Before this and through this journey, I was in the Masters of Sports Administration program, and both of these masters have taught me that I have a true passion, and that passion is empowering change. So today I'm here to talk to all of you and tell you why we need a women in sports law advocacy firm. So, first and foremost, can anyone guess who this is? Say it out loud if you know. Raise your hand. Thank you. If you guessed the one and only Caitlin Clark, you are correct, and we'll come back to her in just a second. So there's a few problems with women in sports right now, and the first problem I'd like to touch on is pay disparity. So female athletes continue to face significantly lower pay than their male counterparts. And this chart demonstrates this. So on the bottom, you will see in the blue the NBA average top player salary at $10.5 million. In the orange line above, you will see the WNBA average top player salary at $242,000. I would also like to make another reference, which is not on the screen right now, but Rocky, the mascot for the Denver Nuggets, makes $2.5 million in 4 years, while Caitlin Clark, who we just mentioned, makes only $338,000 in 4 years. Big difference, right? Okay, so today we have these traditional big law firms. Some of you may or may not have heard of Winston & Strawn, but I would like to focus on this firm. These big law firms take on women in sports issues only after the issue arises, and while we're very grateful that they do take on women's sports, we need a solution and a dedicated firm to do this. So, good thing I have a solution for you all today. Creating a women in sports law advocacy firm. And this firm is dedicated to empowering women through legal support, representation, and advocacy, aiming to dismantle gender barriers and promote equal opportunities in the sports industry. So there is a need for a central location where female athletes can turn to contact anyone for guidance and advice on whichever issue they're facing. So our firm will take a proactive approach compared to the traditional firms like we just mentioned, Winston and Strawn, who take a reactive approach after the issue arises. We want to anticipate the challenges before they even become a big issue. Our firm is dedicated solely to women. We say this because we don't want to just be another case that these big law firms check off their to-do list. We want to be giving these women a voice and a comfortable, safe, and open space to share their thoughts. And while a $24 million settlement for the U.S. women's national team might seem like a lot of money, it's just a temporary fix. We're tired of temporary fixes and remedies, and we want to make this firm create long-lasting change for those generations of female athletes to come. So, these are some services that our firm would provide. First and foremost, we would increase ad revenue generation. We would do this by implementing innovative strategies and creating exposure of female achievements, which will help in the long run boost this ad revenue generation. Now, some of you may have guessed Caitlin Clark earlier, and I bring her up because she is an anomaly. She is one of the most known female basketball players right now who's going into the WNBA and joining the Indiana Fever. While this is great, and she, as some of you might know, signed a $28 million NIL deal with Nike, it's great for her, but there's a lot of female athletes who have the same talent and skills and are not getting the recognition they need, so we're here to bring their voices forward. And lastly, probably the most crucial point is player feedback. Instead of just listening to what these athletes are saying, we want to take this listening and put it into action and implement their ideas and make their voices heard. So some of you may or may not have heard of the NIL, which stands for Name, Image, and Likeness Policy. This affects all Division 1, 2, and 3 student athletes, male or female, and it's a right of publicity. It was enacted July 1st, 2021, and it allows athletes to capitalize and profit off their name, image, and likeness. So 2 examples are a jersey with your name on it or a signed basketball. There will be the allocated profit given to the athlete whose name is on the memorabilia. So the second problem with NIL. So I wrote a thesis paper in one of my master's programs, and it was very clear through multiple testimonies that females receive 1 NIL meeting per semester, giving them a chance to talk about opportunities out there, which sounds great, except males receive 5 to 10 meetings every semester. So to visualize this even more, I made it into apples, and I know some of you might be hungry. So would you prefer 1 apple or 5 to 10 apples? I think you prefer 5 to 10 apples. So, of course, our firm has a dedicated solution for all of you. First, I don't know if all of you have heard of Altius Sports Partners, but here at Northwestern, that's the third party they've brought in to help these student athletes capitalize on their NIL. So they have right now representatives in the Evanston campus in different offices where student athletes can go visit, asking them questions, advice, or giving some guidance throughout the business day. So our goal as a firm is to implement more Altius Sports Partners on every single college campus. And next is collaboration. Our firm will work with governing bodies and influential figures to help spread the word for policy change and equality for women in sports. The third and fourth go along together, assistance and understanding rights. I know we took contracts, we've taken negotiations, so we have a little bit of an idea what goes on, but most people don't understand how contracts work or negotiations, and they don't understand their rights and their value as a player, so that's where our firm steps in to give them assistance and guidance. So the last problem, the gender gap. Women miss out on $1 billion in athletic scholarships annually, which males are capitalizing on. Another hard truth. 90% of universities discriminate against women in sports, and they are not meeting the Title IX standards. So I really like this chart. On the bottom line, you can see in gray, that is the female NCAA participation over the years. The middle blue line is the male participation in the NCAA over the years. The top is the female participation in the NCAA if they were to receive the same opportunities as their male counterparts. So I want you to zone in on that green line, which is the true discrimination gap. But we have solutions. So the first and second kind of go hand in hand. We have awareness and engage with social media platforms. As most of you know, the role of the media continues to increase, and we see a lot of male achievements on the news, on TikTok, Instagram, but where are the female achievements? I don't see many of those. So our plan is to help expose these female achievements through social media platforms and also host Q&A live sessions to answer any questions or confusion. Lastly, we will work with the athletic departments and college campuses to help enforce and implement Title IX standards. So a lot of you are probably asking, where will we receive all of this funding? Because it sounds like it might be expensive. Well, we've mapped out 4 different avenues. So first, grants and donations. Second, we'll do sponsorships and partnerships. I'm sure many of you have seen a Gatorade icon on an NFL field. We want to work with those companies who share our mission to move our initiatives forward. And we'll hold galas and auctions and different types of fundraising events. And lastly, probably my favorite, membership fees. A lot of you are probably thinking, why do we have membership fees at a law firm, right? That's kind of weird. Well, these membership fees will be for individuals who share the same passion and values as our firm do, and we will receive their annual fees, and this will give them access to exclusive events and networking opportunities, and they might even have the chance to see their favorite player. So the time for change is now, and I have one last final question for all of you. What would you want for your daughter in the future? Gender equality or gender disparity? The choice is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Any questions?
So it looks like you're kind of already started this law firm or are in the process of doing it. My question was mostly concerning at the beginning part, you said that it's not going to be a reactive but proactive approach. How do you think specifically that would help with pay, like getting them the legal services early? Do you think that would help with the pay gaps, and how do you think that would help?
I think to answer your question, we want to take a proactive approach because issues tend to start small and then build and get way bigger than they should be. And like this affected the U.S. women's national soccer team because over time there was nothing done about it until you see it all over the news, the pay disparity. So while we are anticipating challenges, we want to see, like, if there's a small problem, we want to address it immediately, and we also want to think what could possibly happen, what services do we need to have in place at that time, who do we need to speak to, like these college campuses, just kind of get ahead of the game based on previous issues.
Okay, just another quick question. For the project, this whole project, have you like already started working on it? And so far, like what are the like major challenges you see in like going forward?
Yeah, so actually I have not completely started the project. I have written income statements and done an outline of what this would look like, but I am attending law school in the fall, so it would be after law school most likely. I do think the biggest challenge is going to be starting from scratch and building, as we've learned in business formation, all of the different parts that come into creating a business, getting everyone involved, and really through networking and connections, working with the governing bodies would be probably the hardest part, I would think. So.
Sounds like an amazing idea.
Thank you.
Hi, Jamie. This topic has been great. I'm so glad you did this. First off, when you brought up the Division I athletes and Division II, the collegiate athlete sports, that was really unique and interesting and it's really important because not a lot of light is shed on that. It's mostly on the professional athletes, but a lot of the professional athletes do come from that background, and I think it's a great basis for most athletes. As a former athlete myself, I played Division I tennis and coached. But one of the problems that I and many others have faced being a female athlete who doesn't have that popular public image. I'm not 6'2", I don't weigh 200 pounds, I'm not big, I don't look strong, but I can, in my glory days, I used to be able to lift 200 pounds, squat 200 pounds, over 200, run, sprint, all these stuff. But every time I say I was a former athlete, I have to explain myself further and go about my credentials. How do you, I guess my question is, what kind of solutions do you think you can implement to change that public's vision of just that it's not about your outer superficial, like that movie Zootopia. That's like one of my favorite movies. The little rabbit, right? So yeah, do you get my question here?
No, I like the reference, but I do understand your question. I think first and foremost, because we do talk and hear the name Caitlin Clark, but there's not a lot of other female athletes that you hear about their detailed achievements. So I think our firm first and foremost will work on that exposure, whether it's with influential figures or the role of social media platforms. I do think that people do not see women achievements as much as males, which is affecting how many people actually attend games to watch. And so I think that's where we would start, because I know, personal example at Texas, women's basketball, they only charged $0 to $5 for us to go see a game because they didn't think anyone would come if they charged more, maybe. I'm not exactly sure why. But males, those games were going for, I spent $150 on big ticket to watch men shove each other on the football field. So, I think it starts with exposure and to show the hard work through social media platforms. We can, take videos of them in the facilities training and really show how much time and effort they've been putting into this and how they should get the same recognition too.
And I love that social media idea, because at the end of the day, the athletes need representation, right? Their sole purpose is to train and perform on that field or court. Mm-hmm. They can't do this as well on top of their job, because that's their job, performing. But one of the things I was worried about as a female athlete is that sometimes those images or social media posts are a little bit sexualized. How do you plan to, what's a good way to present that in a way that public takes them seriously? Like, I'm strong, I can last longer than you, faster than you, right? Or not comparison, but in that, presenting that good image in social media is also really important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think a lot of the negative stigma is coming from people see what's in front of them or what is broadcasted on TV, but they aren't seeing what's behind the scenes. So I really think getting videographers into the training facilities and really just showing that through, and of course there's editing nowadays so we can amplify it even more, and I think just showing the behind the scenes work that goes into what you're actually seeing on the field, the court, in the stadium. So yes, that's what I would say.
Where'd you find the photos for this slide?
I know. So there was once a girl with very curly hair, but I asked my parents to send me cute baby photos of me playing sports.
Jamie, do you expect that your firm would do representation sports agency, or are you really very focused just on the policy and advocacy side? I asked the question because of your financing slide. So, assuming that women athletes begin to make more money, as they should, and your firm is successful in making that happen, seems like that could be a lucrative or some source of income that would help fund the firm as well. But I wasn't sure if that was a part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Leslie, and that would probably come in phase 2 or phase 3. I will say, with my background in sports, I do have some connections to my peers who actually have started sport agencies themselves. So we would make a collaborative environment and maybe mesh all of our ideas together, but not in the beginning. That will fill in later on. Yes.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you.
So I'd like to give one more thank you to this group of presenters. Great job. So next we're going to take a little break for lunch. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you all to stay for a moment so we can get some photos. I'm going to ask any prospective students or admitted students, if you're here, to come on down to the front. We have our admissions manager, Ashley, who will come give you a little welcome. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us for the morning session. We're going to have lunch outside for you in the hallway here, and then we'll start back up with the remaining presentations at 1 p.m. So thank you again to our presenters this morning.
All right. I know we still have some people who are filtering back in, but we're going to get things started because we have a packed block of student presentations here. If you are just joining us today, we'll have 4 presentations that are grouped together, and we'll have time after each presentation. We should have time after each presentation for a couple questions, and then we will wrap up this section and move on to our next one. So I'd like to introduce one of our full-time residential students, Tony Hu. Tony is going to be presenting on misrepresentation in TikTok commercial videos. So Tony, come on over. Welcome to stand here at the podium. You're welcome.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tony, and I'm a full-time residential, also graduating this week. And before coming to MSL, my previous job was in a public relation agency in China, and we work for marketing for car brands. And so today my topic is highly relevant to my previous job and also what I learned from the MSL program. And so first I want to clarify that today I'm going to talk about only what's happening in the Douyin app in China, but there's a difference between the two names. If you ask an employee in the ByteDance company, they will tell you that Douyin is referred to the app in China and TikTok is for the app in other countries. So, but today I will use the word TikTok to refer to, because it's a more common word for you guys. So first I want to explain why brands may prefer to do product comparison videos. So my job responsibility was for Buick and specifically for Regal and LaCrosse, the two very typical mid-size sedan in Buick family. And for example, for Buick Regal, the main competitor product for it is Nissan Tiana and Honda Accord, and they are almost at the same price level. And you will always find that cars at the same price level have similar features, because the more you pay, the more you get, right? But they have differences in detailed features, like, for example, some car model might provide a better speaker, like a Bose speaker, and some might provide like seat heating. So consumers make choices between those based on their favor on the features. And cars are really complicated products with lots of components like it. So it's a very good topic for making product comparison videos because you have a lot to talk about and make comparisons. And also, the mid-size sedan target consumers really cares about cost efficiency. You can imagine that if you can afford a car that value at maybe 300,000, you don't care about the details features. You don't like compare with other car products before you make your final decision. And another reason why we make product comparison video is that it's the largest and most competitive market segment, especially in China, because it's a developing country and most of the people are not that rich. And this is like a sample of what a product comparison video is. Like an influencer stand between two car models and introducing all of the differences and make comparison between the two cars. And those influencers are really money driven. Who pays them? They speak for whom? And you can easily find on TikTok a video that they posted last year. They say product A is quite better than B, and this year it's B better than A. And so some key elements in a product comparison video is that they always emphasize the advantage of product A and the disadvantage of competitor B. And the comparison standards are not that objective. And also the comparisons are not comprehensive. The conclusions are one-sided and misleading. And the content does not have a objective basis or scientific data support. So some legal issues in product comparison videos. So according to the Article 11 of Anti-Unfair Competition Law in China, business operators shall not fabricate or disseminate false or misleading information to damage the business reputation or product reputation of competitors. This is quite similar to what we learned from business tours class, is about like commercial disparagement and deceptive marketing. So who would be liable in this? I built a map for like a typical workflow for a commercial video, and so there are like four parties in this vertical workflow, and the brand Buick and our agency called Longwise, the platform TikTok, and also the influencers. So usually how it works is like the brand and our agency discuss about the main topic of these videos, and we provide a brief to the influencers for them to make a script. And after they make a script, they submit it to us, and we, as the agency and brand, we approve the script to let them start to make videos. And after they make video, they still need to report to us. So you can see like how this works. Like, although the influencers finally post those videos, we as the agency and the brand have acknowledgement of what's happening in the content, and we have power to control it. So of course we are responsible for those videos, and we are liable for any potential risks. And also, do you notice the logo of Buick already changed? So they renewed it's interesting that when Buick renewed its logo in 2022. At first, on social media platforms, people call it three missiles. Can you imagine a US brand in has a huge market in China, and its logo is called three missiles? It's a huge public relation crisis. And also some people call it three nail clippers. And the brand Buick think that this nickname really sucks to present the brand image. So they reached to us and to discuss about another nickname to cover the previous one. And we are really I mean, we really cannot find out a better name than nail clippers. Wait. So here are two screenshots that I made from. This is called Star Map platform created by ByteDance, and all of the commercial videos posted on this platform. This is only companies can have access to this platform, and I don't know why, but my company didn't change its password, so I can still log in. And you can see how we management tasks to the influencers on the right side, and it's also there are like data provided, data analysis provided by the platform. And so, but in China, TikTok take a huge responsibility to monitor all of the video contents posted on the platform. So in order to regulate the video content and lower its legal risk, TikTok no longer allows commercial product comparison videos from 2021. And they also even prohibit the use of serious specific keywords, including like submit and absolute terms. And you can imagine, like we once had a video with an influencer that it doesn't pass through the AI algorithm from the TikTok only because the dog's butt shows up in the video. And are we still making product comparison videos on TikTok? Of course, yes. But how? Like I introduced in the previous page, there was so how to define a commercial TikTok videos? Only when we go through TikTok, it's a TikTok video, commercial TikTok videos. But TikTok actually take out 10% from what we pay, and then they pay to the influencers. But when we skip TikTok, and we can still contract directly with the influencers. But there are certain requirements that if the video is obviously a commercial video, like you are promoting one brand, you will be banned by TikTok because they have that AI algorithm to check it. So we found another pattern to present those comparison videos. Like, so usually it's like product A is good, product B is bad. A is greater than B. That's very simple, but very obvious. And so now we change this model to product A is good because it has both speakers. But product B is good because another reason might be not that important or cared by the consumers. And then we said overall A is a better choice for young customers. This is how we reach to our target consumers. Yeah, that's all for my presentation. Thank you. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Tony. Any questions in the audience right now? I have a question first, which is, do you have any idea if the influencer compensation structure is different in China than it is in the United States?
Yeah, I think there might be, but actually I'm not, I didn't have a TikTok actually. So based on my work experience, I only post like cropped with influencer in Douyin, the China app. Yeah, so I'm not very familiar with what's happening in TikTok actually.
Got it. Questions from the audience? Maggie.
Do you have any example or like general introduction about how Chinese government determine what's actually misleading? Because it seems in a lot of advertisement, they're talking about true things, right? They're just, I guess, emphasizing their advantage of their own product.
Yeah, I think this is similar to what we discussed in the business tours class. And sometimes you even don't provide like false information, but you just be too biased on the content you provide. Sometimes that's also like misleading, I think.
Any other questions from the audience? Do you think that Buick's efforts in the Chinese market have been effective at selling cars? We were just there in March, and I saw a lot of Buicks, probably more so than I see here.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because Buick's like, we usually call it a US brand, but a China brand, but original from US. That's how we usually call it. But it's really like they have a lot of like MPVs like GL8.
Yeah.
That's very popular in China, but you can never see it. It's just only for China. And so Buick is actually more famous in China than US, I think. Right.
I agree.
That's the truth, yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tony, for the presentation. Very interesting. And we'll see what happens with TikTok in the United States. All right, so our next presentation is going to be from a group. We have Peter K. Chan, who is a JD PhD student here at the law school, as well as an MSL alum. We have Raj Patel, who's a full-time residential student graduating this week, and William Song, who is another full-time MSL student graduating this week. And they're going to be talking about empowering the Master of Science in Law program through the introduction of the Northwestern Law and Data Society. So very much looking forward to this presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Raj Samir Patel, and as Evan said, I'm graduating on Friday. I'm a current MSL student. I'm joined by William Song, who is a current MSL student as well, and Peter Chan, an MSL alum and current JD PhD student. We are here to talk about Northwestern Law and Data Society, or NLDS. So William's passion for AI and data science led him to start NLDS earlier this year. He eventually recruited me and to help him get the organization started here at the law school. And during our journey, we eventually approached Peter, who has been instrumental in helping provide direction for our future objectives. So what are our future objectives? Our objectives are to explore the intersection of AI, business, and legal studies, to create a vibrant and constructive atmosphere that fosters collaboration, to offer students opportunities to network with industry leaders and distinguished professors, and to establish a platform that enhances career development for law students in the rapidly growing and ever-evolving world of the AI sector. Besides the three of us, we have a great team, including Iris, who is going to be our president next year. We also have Maeve, who is our secretary, Shuxi, our treasurer, Hao Cheng, our director of events, and Howard, our director of communications. All of us are students that are associated with the MSL program, so we wanted to extend gratitude and appreciation to show the support to the program that has supported us and say we appreciate the guidance of the MSL program. This gratitude extends to our advisors, Leslie Oster, who is the director of the MSL program, as well as Dan Linna, the director of the Law and Technology Initiative. They have been instrumental in helping us in our journey. Through the MSL's guidance, we've been able to create a truly interdisciplinary environment that is inclusive of all students in the law school, regardless of degree program or prior knowledge of AI and data science, and that is something that we are very, very proud of. I'm going to pass it off to William to talk about our journey thus far.
Hi, everyone. I'm William Song. So I'm a current MSL student at preschool. So before joining the MSL program, I completed my undergraduate studies in machine learning and data science at the University of Toronto. So during my time here, I was actively involved in the University of Toronto Venture Club, where I helped organize AI-related events and started to think about creating such an organization of the intersection of emerging technologies, law, and business. So also UTVC's is the first partner of NLDS. So this passion brought me to the MSL program, designed to deepen understanding at this very intersection. So after I came to Chicago, the interactions with like-minded peers inspired me to establish the Northwestern Law and Data Society, the NLDS. So our aim is to amplify the unique aspects of the MSL program, creating a platform where students and the broader community can engage with experts from academia and industry. So I connected with great peers and advisors such as Raj and Peter, so who provided invaluable support and guidance. And together, we established clear objectives, drafted our constitutions, and planned our strategic direction. So after formalizing NLDS with the SBA last November, I represented UTVC at the Walton Summit in Philadelphia, which reinforced my belief in AI's transformative potential in new ventures. So this experience led to our second partnership with the Penn Quakers Venture Club.
You gotta click it kind of hard.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So then in March, I attended the ACM CS Plus Law Symposium in Boston, and Peter and I talked with some distinguished researchers, and we were inspired to create one of our signature initiatives, the AI Plus Law Series, which invites leading academics and industry professionals to discuss the latest trends, challenges, and innovations at the intersection of AI and law. So I will hand it over to Peter to discuss the topics of future of AI.
Thanks. You get next slide. Thanks. Well, thank you, William, for sharing what NLDS has done so far. By way of introduction, I'm Peter K. Chan. I'm a 2019 graduate of the MSL program. I'm also a current JD PhD student at the law school, doing research in law and computer science. Having told you about the beginning of the Northwestern Law and Data Society and our accomplishments thus far, let's look ahead to the future of AI and the future of NLDS. The field of AI has been around for over half a century, but this latest generation of AI, the large language models and large foundation models, are distinguished by the data-driven nature of their development. In the old days, AI systems were handcrafted meticulously by researchers with individual rules and logic statements. However, in the last 10 years, we've witnessed huge advances coming from AI systems that were built not by hand, but by the availability of large quantities of data. Here on the slide, I've put in some numbers to give you a sense of the trend. As AI models get larger, they also consume more data in their training. Moreover, such training data come from a variety of sources, including web crawl data, textbooks, newspapers, video, audio, and others. Can we get the next slide, please? Thanks. The advent of such data-driven AI systems has important questions for how it intersects with law and society. Here I grouped these issues into two broad categories: the use of data during AI system development and the deployment of AI models in a variety of scenarios. So an emergent issue for the development of data-driven AI model is the question of whether AI developers have the right to use publicly available content to train their models. A number of news outlets have sued Microsoft and OpenAI for using their content to train ChatGPT models. These pending cases would determine how much AI developers can train their model on publicly available data. Secondarily, private data leakage is a concern. For example, ChatGPT provides that user input may be used to improve the model. If a lawyer enters a client's data into an AI service, the client's data may be inadvertently leaked out to developer for model improvements, violating the client's confidentiality. On the deployment side, there are many questions being raised by the use of AI models, particularly on liability for untrue or harmful output produced by these models. For example, last year, talk radio host Mark Waters filed a defamation lawsuit because of damaging statements generated by ChatGPT. As another example, in February, a Canadian tribunal held that Air Canada was liable for an untrue statement that its customer service chatbot made to a customer. Within the practice of law, in the last year, there have been at least 2 high-profile examples where lawyers cited non-existent cases generated by AI models in their court filings. I want to point out that these issues are not exclusively questions to be decided by judges or lawyers. In many cases, legally smart professionals in allied fields, such as graduates of the MSL program, including product managers, strategy consultants, or compliance specialists, share the interest and responsibility in the proper usage of AI models. Finally, while I focus on the liability and risk of AI models, these advances also hold broad promises for law and society. In the field of law, a number of companies have developed specialty, legally focused AI models, which are much less liable to untrue output. These advances could allow the practice of law to be more efficient or to more widely increase access to the legal system. Having mentioned the risks and rewards of AI, I'll turn over to William to talk about how NLDS will organize ongoing programming that position Northwestern law students to be at the forefront of AI advancements.
So thank you, Peter. So I'm thrilled to share that one of NLDS initiatives involves a collaboration with Professor David Zaretsky from the ECE department, who is also the CEO, chief scientist, and founder of SNP's Media Assistant. Professor Zaretsky is developing a new class tailored specifically for MSL students, focusing on cutting-edge applications of AI in various fields. So looking ahead, we have some remarkable events lined up for the fall. I'm pleased to announce that Mr. Jerry Ma, Director of Emerging Technology and Chief AI Officer at the USPTO, will be joining us in October to share his insights on the latest advancements in AI technologies within the government sector. Additionally, Professor Carl Muth from the Booth School of Business and Pritzker School of Law will enlighten us on the role of AI in new ventures. And his expertise in entrepreneurship and leadership across leading companies and institutions promises to provide a rich perspective on entrepreneurial opportunities emerging from AI technologies. So the above picture is a screenshot from our website. And as we look into the future, NLDS is committed to deepen our exploration of AI in the legal field. We plan to host a series of events centered around innovation, regulation, and entrepreneurship within the realm of legal technology. So the journey of the Northwestern Law and Data Society is just the beginning. I invite each of you to engage with our initiatives, share your insights, and help us to shape the future of AI in legal profession. So thank you for your attention, and I look forward to see many of you at our upcoming events. So now we are open to any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. And I take the moderator's prerogative here and say to any future MSL students, because we have some in the room, how would you suggest getting involved on campus in things like NLDS, but maybe SBA or other things? Between the three of you, you've covered a lot of different organizations. So would love to hear your thoughts on what people can be doing to get involved when they come to the MSL program.
So from my perspective, our aim is to establish a platform for the MSL students and the larger community, like law students from GD, LLM programs. So we want to create a collaborative environment for the students to interact with each other and talk about topics related to AI technology, like some other emerging technologies like nowadays. So we hope this can be a like a booster or something to help our law students to have more like knowledge and like hands-on skills, like to help their like career path or like explore their own ways in the future. That's it.
Raj, you want to say something?
Sure, yeah. You guys hear me? Can you hear me now? Oh my God, okay. Okay, so from my perspective, there is a lot of opportunity here at the law school if you're willing to kind of put yourself out there, get involved with things you don't necessarily know too much about, and be willing to learn. So I don't have an extensive background in AI or anything that has to do with artificial intelligence or large language models, but you know, in engaging with William and Peter, I've learned a lot, and I think, you know, that's pretty much what I've done this year in my 1 year at the MSL, just kind of be open to learning, and there are plenty of opportunities here to get involved if you are. So, Peter, you want to say something?
Yeah, so having been an MSL student as well as a JD student now, I guess one thing I'll add to what William and Raj said is just at the beginning of the program, jump in. It's 1 year seems like a long time in the beginning, but then next thing you know, it's May. You know, so show up to events for sure, and reach out to people. Understand you're a great law school with a ton of resources. I'll give you an example, right? William emailed me in the middle of the year and said, hey, we're starting this thing. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but I'll talk to you, right? And I'm busy, so I said, I can't really join, but you know, I'll provide advice. And the next thing you know, we talk a few more times, and the organization comes out of it. So don't take it passively. Jump into it, show up to events, talk to people, you know, make the best of it.
I have one more thing.
Yes.
That's a great point. Every single person I've talked to, no matter what program, no matter what professor, if they're associated with the law school and you're associated with the law school, they're willing to talk to you, and that's just an open door for you. That's been huge in my experience, and you know, great point, Peter.
Audience questions.
Hi, great presentation. I was wondering, for the AI development side, is the main legal issue copyright infringement, and what does the court typically hold?
I think that's a really great question, but I think Peter has extensive knowledge on that topic, so I will let him to take this one.
Well, thank you, William. Great question. I don't think there's any final determination. These cases are going through the court system. On the slide, which I didn't talk about in my speech, but they are kind of on two ends of the spectrum. You know, for those of you who might have taken copyrights, you know there's a concept of fair use where we can use content without necessary permission from the copyright owner, but it's not clear how much fair use could extend to training data. So that issue is being resolved by courts. I don't know if we have any resolution at this point. And copyright is certainly, for the development side, a main thing on the on legal issue. Although I will also say that client data leakage is another big one too. You know, I gave the example of a lawyer using ChatGPT and putting their client's data in it. Next thing you know, being trained by ChatGPT, right? Samsung, for example, banned their employees from using generative AI because they don't want their proprietary information just being chatted away by their employees asking AI for help. So they're both confidentiality and copyright and probably a few other issues that I haven't mentioned. But yeah, good question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We are out of time. So. Ruby, will you throw the next presentation up just so I can test the new clicker? As it's going to. All right. Yes, you can hear our chatter. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was wonderful. And now I'm really excited to introduce Andrew Tilka, who is graduating this week as well. Andrew has the privilege of having been an online student and now graduating as a residential student, so best of both worlds. Andrew is going to present in an area that he studied in undergrad and combine it with what he's been doing here in the MSL. So agriculture, sustainability, and how AI is affecting that. So let's learn. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. And like Evan just said, I'm going to be talking about agricultural sustainability in the era of AI, so perfect segue from what the previous group was just talking about. So I'm going to start with my background a little bit, why I care about this issue. I'm going to talk about a problem that we all have. And then after that, I'm going to come up with a couple of ways we might theoretically solve that problem, play devil's advocate for a little bit, and then I'll mention what we can do to help advance this issue. Okay, so first things first, my background. So as many of you in the room are already aware, I'm the chicken guy. I spent 4.5 years studying poultry science at the Prestige Department of Poultry Science at NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina, which also happens to be my hometown. And while I love the research work I've been able to do with chickens, I'm super passionate about this topic. I always get the question, why did you get into this? How did you get into this? And what it really is I care about combating food insecurity, and I care about the issue of agricultural sustainability, which affects each and every one of you in this room and every person on Earth. And this is a topic that has come through in my research that I've been conducting this semester. So agriculture is the common denominator throughout all of human advancement in terms of both culture, in terms of civilization. It's the through line. Our advancement is cumulative. By definition, anything that's cumulative has to be sustainable. So again, this principle of agricultural sustainability comes up time and time again. But I think the biggest reason we should care today about agricultural sustainability is that we have a problem, a really big one. And by we, I mean every single person on Earth right now. It's not a new problem, but it remains a dynamic problem, and it's incumbent upon us today to solve this problem with the technologies we have available. So let's get into it. 9.7 billion people. That's how many people will be on Earth in the year 2050. That's going to demand a food increase of output of 60%. That's a pretty tall order by itself in a vacuum, but it gets more interesting. 50% of the vegetated land on Earth is already used for intensive agriculture, meaning that we're going to have to foot this bill without using any more land. Within the context of the fact that 1/3 of the food that gets produced on Earth gets wasted, and this is largely due to distribution inefficiencies. So in addition to using less land, we're going to have to produce more food and distribute it more efficiently. All of this within the context of a warming climate, a global ecological crisis, and the need to decrease our emissions by up to 67% within the same time frame. So we really do have our work cut out for us here. So, like I said, this is not a new problem. We have addressed this problem many times throughout recorded history. Since the very beginning of recorded history, there are 3 academically agreed upon revolutions in agriculture. The first one is the Neolithic Revolution that introduced controlled agriculture, the distribution of labor, the ability to have complex societies. You move on further in history, we get to the Industrial Revolution. That's physical inventions, updated plows, grain silos, what really brought agriculture into the economic sense that helped us develop a global economy. Then a little bit more into the modern era, we have the Green Revolution, synthetic fertilizers, hybridization breeding practices, what has allowed us to have an exponential growth in human population that has never before been seen on this planet. So the question now is, what's next? What is the 4th agricultural revolution? Well, I'm proposing that it's going to be a combination of emergent technologies. Principally, the one I'm talking about today is artificial intelligence, which this group just did such a great way of introducing, so you're very familiar by now. But I want to say on a conceptual level, agriculture and artificial intelligence are not that different. Take the archetypal example of you're looking at a group of plants. You're going to want to select for the ones that produce the most food in the most efficient timeline and have the greatest resistance to disease. You're drawing out a pattern, you're selecting for that pattern and building in an advantageous way. Well, AI does the same thing. It takes a data set, it selects for a pattern, it builds upon it. So it's not surprising to see that some of the very first industrial applications of agriculture industrial applications of AI are in this field of agriculture. Another thing I want to talk about is another emergent technology some of you may be familiar with, which is cellular agriculture, also called impossible meat or lab-grown meat. This is a topic that Professor Jeffrey Carter Johnson actually is currently conducting research on, and I've had the pleasure of discussing with him at length. But I'm here to propose that a potential combination of these technologies could help us solve our problem. So what would the potential benefits of this be? Well, first and foremost, increased food production. There was a study that was released in 2024, so this year in February, of Nigerian rice farmers. And they were just using ChatGPT to ask questions about how to more efficiently irrigate their rice paddies. And it actually showed an increase in efficiency and an increase in food output. And that's just using ChatGPT. You know, not something that's more contextually specific and designed for that field of agriculture. So you can see that there's a tremendous amount of potential for using AI in an agricultural context. Less land usage. I just mentioned cellular agriculture. If you're able to grow all of your agriculture in a lab somewhere, as opposed to ferrying resources all over the country, that's a way to cut down on land usage. Improve logistics. Well, we know the power of these data models and advanced predictive data modeling. An AI enhancement to that will allow us to cut down our waste, knowing where things need to be ahead of time. That's a huge deal. All of this, by the way, when working together, would help to decrease emissions. So we have something that increases food production, uses less land, improves our logistics, and decreases our emissions. Well, that's starting to sound like a solution to our problem. Time to play devil's advocate in a second. So what would this look like in terms of implementation? Here we are with our current food problem, where we have food insecurity, we have a climate crisis, and where we want to be aspirationally is a combination of emergent technologies. This is where chicken comes into play. Chicken, pound for pound, I promised it would come back up, is half the carbon footprint of the red meat industry. It's more sustainable, and it's also better for you. Pound for pound, it has the highest protein density of any meat. So I think the poultry industry can be leveraged as a means to bridge the gap, to get us where we want to be in terms of these aspirational combinations of emergent technologies. Okay, so I'm going to talk on two issues specifically today with these combinations of emergent technologies. There are a multitude of them, but I know I only have 10 minutes. So the first one I'm going to talk about is a physical nature. Cellular agriculture is dependent on this thing called fetal bovine serum, which is just as problematic ethically in terms of animal welfare as it is in terms of scalability. It's a major constraining factor in our ability to produce this meat, this cellular agriculture at a scale that would be necessary to solve our problem. So the solution lies in synthetic chemistry. Some genius chemist is going to have to come up with the precursors for cellular agriculture in a means that does not involve animal products. And while the companies will make a lot of claims saying that they're in the process of filing for patents or they've solved this problem, they have yet to show us the receipts on this. So this is something to keep in the back of your mind as a potential issue in this area. The other one I'm going to talk about is actually a perfect addressing of the question that was asked in the last presentation, that what are the concerns with AI? Well, while copyright was mentioned, one that I would like to talk about is patentability and inventorship specifically. So we are in this gray area right now with regard to inventorship and patentability of AI technologies. And what that leads to is an uptick of trade secrecy. Now, I'm here to provide the caveat that I'm not against the use of trade secrecy, but I think when used in mass, especially around a particular technology, what that results in is we don't have a participation in what's called the grand compromise. This idea that you get your patent, you get your limited monopoly, and in turn you surrender your technology to the public good. Well, if there's this cloud of uncertainty, all these AI technologies are going to be retained, and they're not going to be surrendered to the public good, and we can't use it to help solve our problem. This is something I've had the pleasure of discussing with Jerry Ma, who was also mentioned in this previous presentation, Director of Emergent Technologies at the PTO. And what he's seen is that there's a ridiculous uptick in filing. There's a lot of enthusiasm during this hype cycle involving AI. But as anyone who's familiar with the PTO knows, it takes time. It's going to take 1 to 3 years before you even receive an initial evaluation of your patent filing. So we have to wait and see. So I think this is just another thing to keep your eye on as we go forward. So what can you do? Well, first and foremost, you can eat more chicken. I hate to be Chick-fil-A's #1 fan right now, but it is the truth. Those of you who selected the chicken offering at lunch today, I salute you. You are part of the solution. Number two, we need clearer and updated regulations and standards for AI technologies, again, to combat that wave of trade secrecy. And then this is another thing that I've been able to talk about with Jerry Ma. keep your eye open. I think in July of this year, the executive department has given the USPTO a drop-dead date to supply more updated standards for AI technology patenting. And then number 3, we need to address the cellular agriculture scalability issue. I think this is the most difficult because there is plenty of funding, there is plenty of attention already directed in this angle, but we still are not quite seeing results. So I think more attention to this is going to be part of the solution. And if we do these 3 things, we will be one step closer to solving the biggest problem on Earth right now. Thank you very much. I hope I've given you some food for thought. And thank you, of course, to these wonderful people who helped make this presentation possible.
You spelled chicken correctly, so I don't think you infringed on any trademarks. Do we have any questions for Andrew? Yes, Jackie.
Hi. So all your data, is it based off of just the US or the world?
For the PTO and patent filing data, or this data for like the problem we have?
For the products. So for the agricultural products.
Sorry, I'm having trouble understanding your question. Do you mean like the need to reduce emissions by 67%? That is all global data. This is an international problem. It affects every person on Earth.
So when you say we could possibly grow food in labs, do you think that would relate to the specific food items growth environment? So like let's say grains or rice, it has to be grown in a warmer climate. So it's mostly grown in warm countries versus another product.
Yeah, of course. So I think you can regionalize your approach to addressing this issue. I think where it can be most impactful is in eliminating the emissions of the red meat industry. So the cattle industry alone is responsible for 15% of global emissions. So for example, if you were able to replace that industry with one with cellular agriculture, that's a really, really meaningful step in the right direction in terms of addressing our global problem.
And for the public concern, would the nutritional benefits still be the same?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, no. There are a number of problems, as I mentioned, with cellular agriculture. Sustainability is just one of them. Maintaining the same nutritional benefits you would get if you were just eating an animal product is one of the main concerns. So there is still a lot of work to be done. I don't think that's a reason we should stop working on it, but it does have a ways to go, which again is why I think the poultry industry is such a big, big asset to us in terms of bridging this gap and getting to where we want to be.
So one of the things you're talking about is, like, if we can reduce beef sort of intake and beef cattle farming, that's going to be good for the environment. Let's just say that we achieve that goal. Would it make sense to then try to reduce chicken consumption and chicken farming?
Sadly, yes. Sadly, yes, that is the case. I think, but again, this is very aspirational. This is doubtful in our lifetimes that we will fully reduce the complete animal products industry. I think in the long term it would be best to transition to some kind of combination of emergent technologies like I was discussing, but I think in the meantime the poultry industry is going to be an asset to us. So it's not going away anytime soon.
Where? Oh, on the panel. Peter K. Chan.
Oh, perfect.
Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate that analogy between growing agricultural plants and then growing an AI model, which I think is actually quite similar. So I appreciate that point. As you were going through this chicken and other agricultural description, I was reminding myself, having seen those YouTube videos of machines zapping pests and weeds and all that, do you see a lot of potential for AI use in those kind of pest management and like harvesting and processing and that type of thing? Whatever comment you can offer, I'll be very curious.
Yeah, actually, I think I alluded to this very briefly, that some of the first industrial applications of AI technologies were in the agricultural sector. It was in soil management and weed prevention. It was using robotics to analyze soil quality and plant quality and gather data from that.
Do you see more advancements in the future?
Oh, of course. As AI models become more data rich, this inevitable coalescence between big data and AI models is so powerful. I think there's a lot of advancement in that particular area.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Any other questions? We may have time for one more. Okay. Thank you so much,
All right,
Andrew. That
thank
was
you.
wonderful. Oh, very good. Jackie?
Sorry, I just like this topic so much. I don't know if you've had enough time to look into like generations of farmers. How would that affect them when you start implementing AI tools in their work?
Yeah, that's also a great question. And anytime we're talking about a technology that has the ability to automate to this degree, you worry about like people's livelihoods, and I think that's a really fair consideration. In terms of making that transition, I go back to that article that just got published in February about the Nigerian farmers that were using an AI technology to assist them. This is not entirely an automation feature. It was really just giving them advice on when to irrigate their crops, based on temperature data. And so I think that there's a way that we can implement these technologies that does not eliminate people's livelihoods as we gradually transition into a different combination of emergent technologies and addressing this problem with the new technologies. I think we will still have jobs for people. I don't think these jobs are just going to completely disappear. You need human oversight for nearly every job on Earth to some degree. But I think, thank you for raising that concern, because that is always in the back of your mind when you're talking about these new, like, game-changing technologies.
I've got a question in the chat, which I think we're going to be over time with it, but it's important. So, what might be the benefits for decreasing disease through AI ag? So, we're seeing a big outbreak of avian flu right now.
Yes.
How can that play a role?
So that's a great question. I may not be fully equipped to handle that question at this time, but I will give my best crack at it. So avian influenza is routinely the biggest concern in the American poultry industry. If you have even one confirmed case in a broiler house, you need to, they call it liquidating. I think that's kind of an insensitive term, but you do remove every animal in that installation. So you can imagine, not only in an animal welfare sense, obviously, there's a huge economic loss in that situation. So I think AI, with its ability, and it has been proven to identify disease and disease resistance in plants. I am not familiar about resistance in animals, but if that potential capability could be leveraged, I think that could be a game changer as well, because that is a huge, huge problem in the poultry industry.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Wonderful presentation.
Appreciate it.
All right. Our final presentation for this block is from Mason Liang. Mason's an online student in the MSL program, and he's going to be talking about peer-to-peer car sharing. So think Turo, for those of you who know that, and some of the other leaders in the space. So Mason, come on over.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Mason Liang. Today I'm going to talking about the topic exploring the legal challenges and the progressives of peer-to-peer car share. Okay, so a little bit introduction about myself. I came to the U.S. like 11 years ago. I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for my undergraduate. That's where I started my peer-to-peer car share. Yes. So how many of you have heard about the service peer-to-peer car share like Turo? Yeah, so we have many. Yeah, that's good. So there, as we know, there wasn't such thing like 10 years ago, right? So that's a definitely brand new thing. So like any new big things, there are many legal challenges because there were zero regulations before, since things so new. So today I'm going to introduce and examine some legal progress regulations in this industry. Okay, so for those of you who never heard about peer-to-peer car share or Turo before, so what is peer-to-peer car share? So basically, peer-to-peer car share is different from traditional car rental company. It's like a Airbnb of cars. Say if you have a personal car, you don't need it for maybe for Monday to Friday. You can put it on the marketplace, share with other people who need a car during that time, and they will share some payments with you to help you either cover your vehicle car loan payment or maybe make a little bit of profit, right? So that's peer-to-peer car share. In order for peer-to-peer car share to be functional, there are marketplaces. They're like Amazon, eBay, or like any online marketplace to facilitate the transaction. Meanwhile, the marketplace, they will also provide you the insurance coverage to cover what happened during the rental period or during the car share period. So usually the marketplace like Turo, they claim they will provide you liability and comprehensive coverage on your property and your operation during the time your vehicle being shared with a stranger, right? So it sounds pretty brilliant idea. Actually, this has been there for a little over 10 years, I think 10, 11 years. Now they are growing very big. I saw many of you already heard about this and maybe even used this before. So since the pandemic, there was a rental car shortage during the pandemic. So that's when Turo really took off, the idea that you can borrow your car or share your car with strangers. So that's the idea of peer-to-peer car share. So many of my customers, sometimes I met my customers, they always wonder, how did you start with this business, right? So in 2017, I downloaded a mobile app called Turo. That's the first pioneer in this peer-to-peer car share industry. So they are like the original peer-to-peer car share marketplace, like eBay or Airbnb, right? So it claims that I can make some money from my vehicle. I said, oh, that sounds a good idea, right? So I decided to give it a try. That's a screenshot actually of the first time I hosted my vehicle. So I shared my personal car with a stranger on April 10th, 2018 in Madison, Wisconsin. So how did that trip go? Let's go. It wasn't too good. So most likely because my personal car back then when I was in undergraduate, it was a C7 Corvette, not ideal car for Wisconsin winter. Right? Because when the customer picked up the car, that day it was cloudy but not snowing. The second day, customer messaged me, hey, my car stuck in front of my house. So can you come here pick it up? Send me a picture. That's my checkout photo from the platform. So it wasn't a smooth start. But after running it a year, when I was in my last year in undergraduate, I made about $39,000 from the car just by sharing it with strangers. So although I had a rough starting with my first trip, the money-wise, it was okay, right? So nowadays, after 6 years, I'm actually the largest peer-to-peer car share host in Chicagoland. Last month in April, I shared my cars with strangers a little over 2,000 days in 1 month. About 400 trips, 2,000 days. So that's what we do now. So I'm very honored and humble to share with you some knowledge or some topic I'm very familiar with, right? So I will go over the legal challenges first. I will go from the federal level first, then go with some state, local level legal challenges in this new industry. So federal level, the rental car industry, they have a strong lobby group. They are trying to, in Congress, to ban Turo in the federal level, or to ban the peer-to-peer car share on federal level. But it's really not a federal matter, right? It's more like a local state matter. It's not really a federal matter. So they can only try to work through the airport. So they want to ban peer-to-peer car share at all US airports because the civilian airport in the US are run by the federal agency, FAA, that's Federal Aviation Authority, right? So the problem is there wasn't really much progress over the past 10 years on the federal level, because I'm pretty sure FAA, they don't really care that much about some people share their cars at the civilian airport. And also members of the US Congress, they are largely not really familiar with this new thing. So yeah, there's not much progress in federal level. So for the legal challenges, there are two big things. First thing, talking about insurance. That's a big thing when you let other people use your property, right? Another thing is tax, because other people, they will pay you for the service. So that's the two main legal challenges, because there were no such thing like a few years ago, like 10 years ago, let's see. So those are the two most biggest challenges facing this industry. And those two challenges are regulated by local state agencies. So it's more of a state matter. So for state level, I will go with New York State. Because New York State, they are very strict about all the new things actually, like Airbnb or Turo or car shares, they're very strict. In May 2013, actually New York State, their Department of Financial Service, NYDFS, very powerful agency, they were able to shut down Turo completely in the New York State because they claim it's a violation of insurance regulations. So for example, Turo, the marketplace, they claim that the owner of the vehicle will not be personally liable for anything happened during the rental or car share period, right? So they do have an agency, like New York agency, providing a comprehensive and a liability policy, like $1 million liability policy, just for the vehicle owners. But also in the state of New York, the NYDFS, they require your personal car insurance cannot refuse coverage for allowed use of your vehicle by other person, even if that's a stranger you completely didn't know. So you see there's a conflict between the insurance provided by the marketplace and also by your personal insurance like Geico, State Farm. That's why New York, that's the first state, they totally shut down Turo. They banned Turo May 2013. And the ban lasts almost 8 years. So 2 years ago, they finally passed the law. We'll go over there first. But I do have a question for you. So imagine if you have your personal car, you occasionally share it online with strangers, and strangers pay you some money, right? You can price like $100 a day, $50 a day, whatever. So do you think your car is still a personal car or being used as commercial vehicle? Any idea? No? So it's a very tricky question. Yeah, they're actually a very tricky question. So your personal insurance policy, like from State Farm or Geico, whatever, they only cover your personal use, not commercial use, right? But by making a profit or involve any type of money transaction by allowing other people using your car, you're actually in a gray area of using your personal vehicle for commercial use. That's why there are no such regulation before. So like the New York way, they just tell all the peer-to-peer car share marketplace, hey, we are not going to allow you to keep operating in New York State anymore until you figure out the insurance thing. Which you can see there's so many parties involved between the marketplace and your personal insurance carrier. So it takes a long time, but eventually in 2021, finally, 2021, that's after 8 years, about 8 years, the state of New York, finally they passed a bill actually to regulate the peer-to-peer car share industry in the state of New York. So you can take a look at the screenshot. That's screenshot from the New York the state government. They do have a bill. It's called peer-to-peer car share programs. Basically, in this bill, so that's after car share marketplace was banned in New York for over 7 years. They finally passed the bill. Let's go over the bill real quick. So in the bill, you can see that's typically a bill regarding something like brand new, some new industry. They define the definition, what is peer-to-peer car share, and all the definition, right? So eventually, the regulation on the law, the regulation, they basically separate the liability. They say, hey, if your car being shared, the marketplace, they provide you coverage, covers what happens. Meanwhile, your personal insurance won't get involved. Before that, there's no clear line between your personal one and the insurance provided by the marketplace. So that's typically a bill. So after New York passed the bill, Illinois passed the bill, like literally a month later, then you can see all the list of states in the US, more than like half the states, all passed a very similar bill. Actually, those bills are structured and worded very much like the peer-to-peer car share program in New York State. So like New York State, they started the bill, the other states kind of following their guidance. So here's the bill in the state of Illinois. It's largely similar to New York State in the structure, like each chapter, they're almost identical. Some different in detail in words, but most likely they are, I say, over 80%, over 90% similar. So now let's talk about the tax matters. When there's money involved, there are tax issues. So for traditional car rental company, when they buy a car, they don't pay sales tax. And they only collect 5%, for state of Illinois, they only collect 5% usage tax from the customers. Then they reimburse the tax to the state Department of Revenue. For peer-to-peer car share, even after all the laws, regulation passed, they do charge a sales tax instead of the car rental tax, which is a lot higher. For example, in Chicago, the sales tax are around 10% compared to the 5% rental tax, right? And also when a customer buy a car, they do pay sales tax. So actually, for all the host or for the peer-to-peer car share transaction, the customer and the host, they both pay sales tax. So they were taxed twice. The time they bought a car and the time a customer or shared a car with them. So that's a tax matter, something to think about. So any questions?
Peter K. Chan has a question. I'm going to ask one on my way down, which is...
Oh, I got a mic here.
Well, hold on. First, I'm going. How would you compare the maturity of the peer-to-peer car sharing market with the maturity of the peer-to-peer home sharing market?
So I think Airbnb is the first. They started the idea that you share your stuff with other people. So the Airbnb, I think Airbnb, like the home share, vacational home share, and car share. Car share is a newer thing compared to Airbnb, but they have been in progress for over 10 years. Now they have been accepted by a lot of people, majority of society. So it's very mature, I think, at this moment, especially after the pandemic.
I got it. So, well, first of all, I want to say I appreciate that presentation. I also ran a business before I came to the MSL program, so it's very interesting to see, the things you had to wrestle with. I promise this is not a question that Leslie requested me to ask. I'm really personally interested. What MSL class or classes did you find interesting as you go through the program with regards to your experience as a business owner and somebody who runs an enterprise?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think as an entrepreneur or business owner, you deal with legal matters almost every day in your operation. When you hire someone, you sign a contract. When you do a business with a customer, you also sign a contract, right? So when anything went bad or anything happens, you also deal with lawyers, customers. So I think for me, the first license I took, because I'm a part-time student, I only took 5 licenses so far. The first one is legal process. That license was actually really, really helpful for me because before taking the class, I don't understand how the system works, how a bill started from a bill, after 7 years become a law, like the New York State peer-to-peer car share regulation. Now I think after taking that class, I could understand the process way more clear, and also I can understand the difference between state level laws and the federal level laws. So that part was really, really helpful. Another class I took was contract law, because we deal with customers, we deal with, basically in today's world, if you run any business, you are dealing with contract constantly, all right? Even when you sign a property or even your electricity bill, you are dealing with contract. So that part is really, really helpful as well. And also another class I took was a PowerWay class, negotiation skills, was really, really helpful. I wish I could took that class earlier, because I made some. Right, it's really helpful because I do have other businesses. In some other business, we end up in a negotiation situation with a larger public trading company, right? They're regarding some bills amount. So we do ask questions from lawyers, but that lawyer is a bankrupt lawyer, so he couldn't give me any really, really meaningful help, tips, because we do have property under the company, so we couldn't just go bankrupt, right? So after taking that class, when I look back what we did during that negotiation, I can almost tell what they are doing each step. Like they raised a high desire, like the inspiration really high, not even. Doesn't make much sense, but get a high inspiration. They lower their goal to their like a ZOPA, like something like that, the Zopa, yeah. So now, after taking that class, I can, when I look back, I wish I took class earlier, could save me a lot of money.
Wonderful. Well, Mason, thank you so much for that. I think tax classes are in your future, taxation stuff. Yes, thank you so much. Wonderful presentation. There's some snacks outside. We don't have a ton of time, so please, if you're grabbing something, just be very quick. And yeah, we're looking forward to the next block of presentations.
Everybody scoop this way just a little bit. Right there, Peter, you're good. All right, perfect, guys. Thank you. All right, looking good. Couple more. And that'll do it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Enjoy.
Great job. Good job, guys. Hey. Hey, Mason, this was easy. I love that you had your own job. Thank you. I like the very long. No, I just like it all connected to the end. That was awesome. I think we went to the IP conference. Yeah. You can tell though, right? Yeah. Okay, you got the one course, yes. The one course calculates the yeah, he was at the panel, yeah. I mean, I could probably put you in contact with him. He's a really, really nice guy. So y'all, this is such a good stuff. Are we the best session yet? I mean, I can't say this. You're being recorded. I legally say no, it's really cool. You know, you'll need such like depth of expertise. Like I never get to see right now. It's really so much yeah. It was super interesting. Oh yeah. I was talking about like the TikTok videos Hey, great. That's good. Good to be done. Look, there's snacks outside.
For those of you in the room and online, this is your 2-minute warning. Your 2-minute warning. I can get my presenters down when they are ready. Those are yours, yeah? Okay.
I'm just putting it here before. Yeah.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the next block of our MSL Symposium. We've got a trio of awesome presentations from graduating full-time students for you. Our first presenter is going to talk to us about Rights for Nature, Lessons from Crossroads of the Americas. Please welcome to present Cameron Brown.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Cameron Brown, and I'm a full-time residential student here at the MSL program. And I had the opportunity to go and participate in International Team Project, which is a really great 10-week program that gives us the opportunity to experience a comparative legal analysis in another country and allow us to explore some valuable lessons for here in the United States. There are two others who join us today, Raj Patel, who's going to be speaking, and Addie Doyle, who both went to 2 different countries. But for me, I went to Panama, and I got to explore a very interesting question around what happens when you instill legal rights to non-human entities, which is oftentimes fraught with a lot of legal questions, and we'll speak about what that means for nature today. So we'll start off with a little bit of a story. Right on your screen is Toby the Sloth. Toby the Sloth is a two-toed sloth, very common to Panama, and is oftentimes a cultural symbol, the two-toed sloth, of Panama's unique biodiversity. And what's nice about the two-toed sloth is, despite their reputation, they're very fast. But they're very fast at swinging amongst the trees. They love spending their entire life up in the tree canopies, getting themselves into experiences in their lifetime that is oftentimes 50 to 100 feet above the ground. They don't like to go down to the ground for a lot of reasons. Oftentimes there's threats from predators. For a long time, they were able to swing amongst the tree canopies without interruption going from place to place. But with human development within Panama, their habitats began to fragment as humans began to build roads and bridges and rail lines to be able to accommodate their growing population. And what that does, it creates interruptions in the tree canopy, which makes lives like Toby's very difficult because that forces two-toed sloths to go down to the ground where they're slower, less mobile, more vulnerable to predators, but also more vulnerable to human activity, especially passing vehicles. So we're going to talk about how that could be mitigated through some unique challenges, especially in the realm of this country being so unique. Panama is a bridge between continents. It spans North and South America, and because of its unique position in the geographic landmass that is the Americas, it actually serves as an intersection point between the North American and South American biomes. And that yields a lot of biodiversity. Like its neighbor to the north, Costa Rica, Panama is a biodiversity hotspot. The United States is also one, but the United States is a biodiversity hotspot because of its sheer size. It's a huge country. Panama is a fraction of the United States land area, yet has about 80% of the number of plants and animals that the United States possesses within its territory. And under this this umbrella of biodiversity, there are some risks that do come with this, especially given Panama's small size and its fast-growing economy. It is the fastest-growing economy in the Americas, which allows it to prosper in its own right, but also oftentimes at the expense of nature. Deforestation is the biggest driver of ecological devastation in Panama, and oftentimes it presents some unique challenges for the biodiversity of the country, but also its sustainability moving forward. And with that, it kind of presents a big question, which we'll explore in more detail today, which is how contracts can be a catalyst for ecological change, especially in the realm of indigenous communities. Especially specifically when we talk about rights for non-human entities, this could be an important catalyst to actually confer those rights in a way that might be unique or creative in ways that we might not fully expect. So Panama in 2022 passed a constitutional amendment that established a right to nature in Panama. It's called Law 287, and what it does is it instills rights to nature and gives it the ability to exist. And we'll break it down a little bit more. But it was through the efforts of US-based environmental activists partnering with legislators in the Panamanian legislature, its General Assembly, to get it passed in quick succession, with much to the benefit of environmental activists in Panama and also around the world. But what we find is that there are some, give me 1 second. Oh, there you go. What we find that the Panama's right to nature has 3 specific components. The first component is its scope. Not only does the Panama's right to nature not instill it the right to exist in its present form, it allows it to exist in its future form as well. To live, to die, to regenerate in a way that conforms to its ecological and its evolutionary obligations. And what it does by doing so, and the way it accomplishes that, is by instilling obligations on the government to adopt policies considering the impact on nature. And the legal principle underlying this is a principle called in dubio pro natura, which is a Latin phrase for when in doubt, defer to nature. And what this means is it's essentially a balancing test. So whenever the legislature considers a policy, or whenever the courts need to consider an impact on the environment, it must look at the natural interest and the secondary interest and weigh them. If you find that the natural interest greatly exceeds the secondary interest, or vice versa, obviously you can defer to one or the other. But if they are equal, you generally will just defer to nature by default, which allows there to be broader protections. Environmental activists globally love this. They were like, this is amazing. This is exactly what we need. But there are a lot of issues with that. And oftentimes we found that this right to nature oftentimes failed to do what it was promised to do. And this came largely because of the way it was written. It was a very philosophically driven bill that would work in a country like the United States, for reasons we'll explain later, but doesn't work in a country like Panama. Because Panama's civil law system requires it to be more explicit in various provisions, there was a lack of enforceability with respect to who would be enforcing the law within the executive branch of Panama, and also who would be ultimately responsible for ensuring that the rights to nature provisions are upheld. So there was practically no guidance for the Ministry of Environment or other organizations to reinforce the provisions outlined in this bill. Additionally, there's a lack of guidance for the courts. They didn't really know, beyond this singular legal principle, what exactly the principle of deferring to nature looked like. Was it in terms of litigation where there's two warring parties? Is it something related to a government action? It was very unclear. And perhaps most critically, there wasn't a private right to action instilled in the provisions of this bill. Oftentimes, the government is who is responsible for doing that, but no government has that sort of bureaucratic flexibility to be able to engage in the slew of challenges any country faces, much less Panama by way of environmental law, which severely limited the ability of its scope. And private right to action, if you don't understand, is the ability for a third-party interest to be able to advocate on behalf of a entity that is experiencing pressures, namely, in this case, a natural element. So where was it successful? Well, it was successful in one specific and critical context, and that was indigenous rights. In the United States, we have native reservations, but in Panama, we have comarcas. And comarcas are akin to native reservations, but instead of being instilled by treaty, like they are here in the United States, they come into existence through contract, and they conform to the contract and property law that's already present within Panamanian society, which oftentimes actually, owing to its past history, mirrors that of the United States. They're reserved lands with indigenous sovereignty, so indigenous communities have the rights over this predetermined set of land. The consideration is the land in which they occupy, and in exchange for holding up its promise to keep the land in an untouched, mostly wilderness state, they're able to use that land as they see fit, as long as it's within the bounds of what is known as subsistence activities, which is whatever's basically necessary to ensure their survival and their ability to thrive on the land. And this kind of root and contract law allows disputes to be readily realized in a way that makes the most sense for the case-by-case disagreements that tend to happen between indigenous communities and other types of landowners. So this has presented some interesting questions about tribes being a potential solution for a lot of land conservation questions that we have. Oftentimes, government-driven initiatives have their own unique problems. We see this with national parks. We see this with nature reserves. Oftentimes, they do a lot, but they don't go as far as they need to, because that kind of idea of an old-growth, untouched wilderness state is oftentimes not always realized. But comarcas are really good catalysts for guaranteeing that. Indigenous communities oftentimes have a great generational, centuries-long expansive knowledge of the land in which they occupy. They know what works for them. They know only to take as much as they need, and oftentimes that's reflected in their behaviors, which in turn kind of creates sort of double protections. You have the protections guaranteed in the contract, but also protections guaranteed in that of the indigenous community and their behaviors, which raises some interesting questions with respect to what this can mean for land conservation. And these impacts are quite immense. We actually found that the right to nature was most realized in these comarcas, because these comarcas actually pre-existed the right to nature legislation. And we found that these indigenous communities, when faced with litigation over their contract, were able to defer to this law more frequently to ensure that they're here helping support this obligation. And by nature of this sort of government, of their contract being between them and the government, that allows an even greater mandate to ensure that complexities around private landowners and third-party interests don't actually infringe on their rights over their land, which in short makes comarcas the most protected lands in all of Panama relative to other types of protected lands there. But there are some challenges. What you find is that tribes don't have a lot of resources. Oftentimes, indigenous communities are facing immense poverty. They are the single most impoverished group, not just in Panama, but across the Western Hemisphere. And these contracts, in a way, sort of reinforce that poverty because they're limited to activities that ensure their subsistence. They can't actually expand economically to other forms of revenue-generating streams, notably resource extraction and other sort of elements. We actually met an indigenous community that had to leave their comarca to go to an area close to the Panama Canal to engage with tourists and make money in that way. And what you also find is that there's complexities in comarca contracts. Comarcas are huge. Like there are millions of acres, thousands of square miles, and sometimes they intersect with pre-existing claims from private entities. And those sorts of complexities are oftentimes baked into comarca contracts because private entities generally retain their rights to the land even after the comarcas are established. So you have some situations with private landowners owning territory that is within comarca land. And then finally, civil law in Panama provides some unique issues. Americans complain oftentimes about the limitations of and challenges of common law, but with a type of philosophically driven legislation like we find with the right to nature, civil law provides some glaring gaps that make it very difficult to actually make a right to nature realized. Because in civil law countries, the legislature has to actually articulate more clearly what enforcement looks like and what the scope of the law looks like. And if it's limited, thus the law becomes toothless and limited in its own way, because courts can't expand the reach of the law in a way that actually makes sense to the situations presented in front of them. So there's some lessons for the United States. We could actually have a lot to take away from this that can make this a promising approach for us. We found here in this country that tribes can be stewards of the land. The concept of a right to nature and the concept of indigenous land stewardship is really important in the overall conversation, but actually began here in this country. And a lot of US-based activists were the ones who helped push this type of legislation in Panama. And there have been court actions here in the United States that have also reinforced that right. And we've seen over the past 10 years, especially a broad expansion of indigenous communities' rights to determine what happens to their land and enhancement of their sovereignty guaranteed in the treaties that were conferred upon them with the US government. Secondly, we have a right to, a lot of states have recognized a right to enjoy nature. Most notably, there was a Montana court case earlier this year where a group of youths sued the state government for failing to uphold Montana's right to nature adjacent constitutional amendment that was passed about 40 years prior. And what that did was help ensure that those types of state-level constitutional guarantees have a very firm legal basis. And there's another 6 states with similar types of legislation or constitutionally inscribed rights. And then finally, our country has a common law system that permits such expansive sweeping legislation like a right to nature to be reinterpreted by the courts in a way that makes more sense for the changing needs of our country and also the obligations of specific parties in dispute. And if we continue to, with our often cited tradition of having a private right to action with respect to litigation, that can help reinforce a lot of rights for natural entities, because we can have third-party groups or individuals sue on behalf of nature, which oftentimes doesn't have a voice of its own. And this type of lesson is really important because we need to have two-toed sloths like Toby, if this moves, there you go, be able to swing between the trees across the tree canopy without interruption, without any sort of challenges or barriers in the way of living their lives, so we can have a more sustainable future where humans are living side by side with animals like Toby instead of necessarily against them. And if looking for resources for similar advocacy here in the United States, the First Nations Development Institute is looking to instill similar types of protections like we do in Panama, and you can join through this information here. Thank you very much. If there are any questions.
Thank you so much, Cameron. Do you have any questions from the audience? Any questions?
No questions. Oh.
Do I see one? We've got a hand, all right.
So in class we've talked a lot about the private cause of action in legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it might be a better approach in this instance to have a individual human representative on behalf of the land rather than having the state, or in the example of the US, an AG, be the one bringing the cause of action to be more effective?
And just to clarify your question, you're asking if it's more effective to have individuals
For example,
bring
from the
action on
comarcas,
behalf of the land.
right.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of advantages to that. A lot of what Panama experiences with respect to their right to nature legislation is that the government has to be the responsible party with respect to bringing forth litigation. And obviously, government is only one institution. There's a lot of bureaucracy involved in that as well, which limits the ability of there to be an effective set of litigation that could actually kind of get the courts to have a solid body of case law. So private activity oftentimes helps mitigate that. But also on top of that, oftentimes a private entity or a third-party organization rather than the government might have a more intimate idea of what the land is like, whether they're a local landowner or indigenous tribe, that more adequately, I think, represents the land in a way that government simply can't always.
Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions for Cameron? Excellent job. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next presenter is going to speak to us about challenges in enhancing support for chronic disease patients. Please welcome up to present Meike Zhang. When you use the clicker, be sure to point it right up at the sound booth. Do I click that one? No, the forward button.
Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Meike. Today I'm going to be presenting about an independent study that I've been doing with Professor Sanders in the last semester. But before I start with the main topic, I'm going to give you a number. It's 80 million. What's 80 million? I mean, if you put it in dollars, that could be the market value of an innovative company that's doing pretty good, right? It could be the population of several states combined, probably. But here, 80 million is the number of elderly people over 60 years old increase in the last 10 years in China. And all these people, they need care. In 2023, China launched its boldest healthcare insurance reform in the past 20 years to boost support for chronic disease patients, particularly elderlies. Today, I'll analyze this impact and share the key insights we can learn from it. But first of all, you might question, well, why should I be concerned? Well, I'm Meike. Most of you guys probably know me as Maggie, but Meike is my legal name. I'm Chinese, so of course I care. But why should people living in America care? Well, what events in a distant land across the sea might seem irrelevant, the US grapples with one of the world's most controversial and problematic healthcare systems. And it also faced the challenges of an aging population, similar to what we see in East Asia. Thus, drawing lessons from international policy is crucial for us to navigating the healthcare policy over here. So, China has two main public healthcare insurance schemes: the Urban Employee Basic Insurance System and the Urban Rural Residents Basic Medical Insurance. The first, as you can see here in the slides, are for employed and retired urban residents. The premiums is covered by employers. It offers extensive coverage even after retirement. The latter one is for essentially everyone else. It requires individuals to pay their premium annually for basic coverage. Before 2023 reform, both the employee and the resident's healthcare mostly covered inpatient costs. They offer really limited coverage for outpatient costs. Now the problem is, why the reform and why 2023? Well, here's some more number. In just 1 year, China allocated over $242 billion towards COVID control. That is nearly $700 million every single day. This intensive expenditure underscored the pressing need for increased funding in the healthcare system. Actually, scholars warned that without additional resources, the system could exhaust its reserve in less than a decade. At the same time, approximately $130 billion lies in employees' personal accounts, often remaining unused. Beneath these financial dynamics looms the overarching challenges of aging population.